Alright, so in the latest chapter 1154, Rox D. Xebec is finally revealed, and that's because we are in Loki's flashback at the moment. So we come to Loki after him trying to, essentially take himself out completely. He's, at his wit's end. And suddenly, as he's just laying there crying, a mountain behind him gets cut in half. Then he's confronted by the Rox pirates. Whitebeard, Shiki, and Stussy, and then we see Rox himself for the first time in the series, and it's also revealed that he is the father of Blackbeard. So let's get into this, let's break it down, there's a lot to talk about here. So, we're getting a few things immediately established. First of all, Rox is incredibly strong, as we suspected. There was a lingering theory that he may have been a fraud or something, but no. It is confirmed in this chapter that he defeated a Marine Admiral. Now this was, back in the day. We don't know who this Admiral was, but he was an Admiral nonetheless, so he is, Admiral level, which is incredibly impressive for somebody to defeat somebody like that. Usually it's only Yonkos who could defeat Admirals at this point, or from what we've seen. Or at least somebody relative to that power. And I guess this is why legends like Whitebeard and Shiki decided to follow Rox, because he was such a beast. Now, how did he cut this mountain in half? Not really sure. I'm sure he has a sword. I think we saw that before. We don't really see it in this panel of his introduction. But if it's not a sword, it could be whatever devil fruit he has. Now, a big popular theory right now is that he actually had the Ope Ope no Mi, which is Law's devil fruit, because he's holding up his two fingers in this panel, similar to how Law does when he's activating Room. However, I don't really think that's the case. He's asking two questions to Loki here. So I think that's what the two fingers here represents. Now another option for his devil fruit is of course the Yami Yami no Mi, the darkness Logia that Blackbeard currently has. We know that Blackbeard searched for that fruit for a really long time, 20 years or something, I don't know. But he joined Whitebeard to specifically get that fruit. So it's very likely that it's because it belonged to his father, Rox, or Rox himself was searching for that fruit and he never found it, and Blackbeard knew that for some reason. Now, let's go into him being Blackbeard's father. Again, we're just finding this out. We don't really have too much to go off of it, but this was a lingering theory for a very long time. I mean, since Rox was first introduced, 2019, 2018? I think it was 2019 maybe. It was, during the Reverie, right? And his name, Xebec, immediately rang some bells because we know that Blackbeard's ship is called the Saber of Xebec. So this finally confirms that, which is nice, and of course he looks just like Blackbeard, but he also looks like somebody else that we'll get into. I mean, you already read the title of this video, you know what we're going to be talking about, but this flashback right now, I'm pretty sure it's 48 years into the past, which is 8 years before Blackbeard would have been born. And it kind of lines up with God Valley, more or less. I mean, maybe not exactly, but it's around that time. And I wonder if he had Blackbeard with him at that point, and maybe Blackbeard was also left at God Valley. Even though he wasn't found the way that Shanks was, I just think it would be pretty interesting. And it's also kind of implied that Rox was straight up killed at God Valley. We still don't know the full details yet, but maybe he was defeated by Garling and Roger. Maybe even Garp, too. And that's why Blackbeard has a beef with everyone, essentially, because, he wound up defeating Ace, who was the son of Roger, and he has serious beef with Shanks, who is the son of Garling, so maybe that's why. And then, of course, Luffy, Dragon, but he seems to not really care too much about Luffy, but he absolutely despises Shanks. I mean, I think it's more so because Shanks is a Celestial Dragon, and the D's and the Celestial Dragons, of course, are arch enemies. But there's some stuff going on there for sure. Still don't know if Blackbeard is a Buccaneer or if Rox is a Buccaneer, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are. It goes back to Saturn talking to Katarina Devon back at Egghead, when he said that Blackbeard comes from a special lineage or something. I'm paraphrasing, but that could have meant just being Rox's son, or it could mean more than that, and that they are Buccaneers or something. Now let's talk about Buggy, because there's kind of a good chance that Rox is Buggy's father. So even before we saw Rox's face, this was a theory. I mean, we just talked about this on the channel a couple weeks ago with Sai, And it seems to be pretty popular. Like, it did well. Like, views-wise, interest-wise, that theory did pretty well. So it seems like people are on board with this being a possibility. Now, if you cut Rox's face down the middle, on the left-hand side, he looks more like Blackbeard, but on the right side, he looks more like Buggy. His nose is almost kind of bulbous as well. So does this mean that he is Buggy's father? I mean, I don't know, but man, you can't deny that it looks just like Buggy. I think that would be really cool. And it even lends the theory that he has like the chop chop fruit in this instance. And it's like awakened, and that's how he cut the mountain in half. I mean, you know, we're just having fun here. It's not like Buggy, you know, intentionally ate the chop chop fruit. It was like an accident when Shanks, you know, had it already and he ate it. It could just be a big grand coincidence, or that fruit chose him despite not being a Zhoniin, or it is a Zhoniin secretly, I don't know. But if you look at all of the people who are currently in the race for the One Piece, they all have significant fathers, or just a significant lineage. Shanks, the son of Garling, Blackbeard, the son of Rox, Luffy, the son of Dragon, who is the son of Garp, and then we have Buggy. So it's like, who is Buggy's significant family member? Is it Rox? Because Buggy is 39 years old. So I think he is technically old enough to just be Rox's son. I mean, it almost lines up perfectly. I could be wrong. And it could explain his affinity to Shanks. Maybe he's like the opposite of Blackbeard. And it also could explain why Buggy is so charismatic and so good at wrangling people. It's because he's a D. You know, Rox D. Xebec, he would be Buggy D. Xebec or whatever. I don't know what's going on with the nose. We also talked about this with Sai a couple weeks ago. Apparently the nose is like real. I don't know why he has that nose. Could be some kind of defect, or like maybe it was Buggy's mother, who was obviously different than Blackbeard's mother. Maybe that's supposed to also parallel to Harold. Harold having, you know, two different sons with two different women. You know, Hyrutin, kind of like the runt of the litter, and then Loki, the absolute beast. Could be the same thing with Blackbeard or Buggy. So we're seeing the debut of Rox in this chapter, because we're picking up from the end of the previous one, where Rox and his crew has made their way to Elbaf and they're encountering Loki. Rox wants to see King Harold, so he like injures Loki as a way to like lure Harold back to Elbaf, because he's not there at that moment in time. And in this chapter we find out why Rox is so interested in Harold, and it's because he essentially has like a bromance with him, because they actually met at the Reverie 8 years prior to the current time in the flashback we're in. And then we kind of just cut to the Reverie at this point, and we see that Rox, the mad lad that he is, made his way through the Reverie, through Marijois, through the Pangaea Castle, kidnapped 5 kings, and then got to the Room of Flowers where Imu is, and he's just chilling there. And he has like a pistol too. But the thing is that somehow he's made it there, and it's said that it is the first and last of its kind, that in the history of Imu ruling, you know, the world, this is the only time that someone has made it to the Room of Flowers. And then since then, no one else has done it. So Rox is the only person to ever be able to do this, which is like, you know, GOAT status for sure. And he's just so nonchalant about it. Like, he's just sitting down, talking to Imu. And Imu's nonchalant too, saying that, like, you know, kidnapping those 5 kings, that's not enough to extort me. But Rox says that he's a Davy Jonesian pirate. Now, I talked about this before, but I'll just put it out there real quick for anyone who didn't hear what I had to say about this. But it's very possible that Davy Jones was a person that actually existed in the One Piece world, maybe going back 3,000 years ago. It could be like the counterpart to Sun God Nika. You know, the way that there's like Luffy and Blackbeard and Rox and Roger, there could be like that with Davy Jones and Nika possibly. And I only say that because we're seeing like the influence of generations on the future generations, and how it's kind of like linear to like the hero and the anti-hero or anti-villain. Especially with Loki saying how he's influenced by Rox, and now Rox essentially saying that he himself is influenced by this Davy Jones individual. But at the end of this sequence, it says that Rox knew that there was nothing more he could do in that moment. So he withdrew, and with these words, he said, "Just wait, one day I'll be back." So that's fascinating. He knew that there was nothing more he could do in that moment, meaning, like, yeah, he knew he couldn't defeat Emu. Like, yeah, Rox is super powerful, and he's probably got a crazy ego, but he's not stupid. Like, he knows Emu's the one above all, essentially. He could probably sense their hockey. I mean, like, we saw when Emu inhabited Gunko and Elbaf, how everyone reacted to just that. So being in Emu's presence, you must realize that, like, okay, this is like God tier power. So he's like, you know, just wait, one day I'll be back. Now, yeah, I guess he doesn't return because, I mean, we're going to find out because it seems like we're going through Rox's life as much as we're going through Loki's in this flashback. But if he doesn't return, it could be that either Blackbeard, his son, returns, you know, carrying his will, or Buggy, his possible other son, carrying his will. And we'll get into that because you already saw the thumbnail of this video. You know we're going to be talking about that. But after Rox leaves, he runs into Harold. Harold's at the Reverie too. He's like on fire running. And they're just converging on each other at this point. And they have this huge clash. Like, implied to be Conqueror's hockey. I mean, it looks like it is. I'm pretty sure it is. And the impact that it's making is pretty much what Conqueror Hockey Clash does. Confirming that, yeah, Rox has Conqueror's hockey, and so does Harold. So I guess Loki has Conqueror's hockey too. Was that already confirmed? I'm not sure if it was, but I'm pretty sure Loki has it. And I also think it hasn't been confirmed that Blackbeard has Conqueror's hockey, but I guess he kind of has to have it too if Rox has it. Maybe even Buggy has it too. I don't know. But it says the clash between these two strangers blew everyone away within a 5-kilometer radius. So yeah, two incredibly powerful guys. Also, it says that Rox had killed a freaking admiral right before this. You know, we found that out in the previous chapter that Rox took down an admiral. And that's what essentially made him infamous. You know, aside from breaking into the Room of Flowers and meeting Emu, but he took down a freaking admiral. So I guess at this point in time, Harold is pretty strong, obviously. I mean, he's like definitely admiral level, I guess. Because this is what made Rox really interested in Harold. This is what started the bromance for him. They had this clash, and Rox was like, whoa, you're powerful, dude. And then they kind of like exchange info on how to get to Elbaf. And yeah, that's what takes us back to the beginning of the chapter. That's why Rox is there, because he's coming back to try to convince Harold to join his crew. But we'll get to that because we're seeing Rox's bounty poster revealed here. Because, you know, like we talked about, he killed the freaking admiral, he kidnapped those 5 kings, broke into the Room of Flowers, so he's got a pretty juicy bounty here. We're not seeing what it is, but it's probably in the billions for sure. Now, the super fascinating thing about this bounty poster is that it looks exactly the same as Buggy's current bounty poster. That's right. See, the funny thing is that when we were talking about Buggy and Rox last week, we were just kind of going off of how his face looked. That's it. If you cut it in half, you know, one half looks like Blackbeard, one half looks like Buggy. Kind of. It could have meant that they are, you know, his children, or it's just Oda repeating character designs or something maybe. But no, there's something going on here for sure. You can't say there's not. This is not a coincidence. There's no way. I mean, look at it. It's the same thing. Come on. Now, either Buggy is straight up Rox's son, or Buggy is like carrying on the will of Rox, the same way that Blackbeard is, despite not being, you know, his blood. Or he's just straight up his son, and we've got like another Shanks Shamrock thing going on, except, you know, one of them is kind of like the runt of the litter, with Buggy not being a powerhouse at all, but Buggy makes up for it with like his charisma and luck. Like, you know, he kind of has like a supernatural luck ability, I guess you could say. He has like plot armor the way that Luffy does, despite not being the main character, which makes you incredibly powerful. You're essentially a reality manipulator at that point if you're a character that is not the main character in a series with plot armor. But also, you know, we talked about it before, Buggy is 39 years old. That kind of lines up with when Rox would have died, somewhere around that time, if he did die. We also talked about how like all the Yonkos right now have a significant lineage to them. You know, Blackbeard, Rox, Shanks with Garling and Shamrock, Luffy with Dragon and Garp, So now it's like, what's going on with Buggy? And why does Buggy have that nose? Why is he like a clown man? I mean, I guess it had to do with his mother, right? If Rox is his father. And also, why did Roger take Buggy under his wing? Because he had to have known that Shanks was Garling's son. So what's going on with Buggy? And also, if that is the case, then Buggy is a D. Which I suspected before. I suspected Buggy had to be a D or Celestial Dragon. So I guess he's a D now because, you know, like the Ds have like that ability to attract people or whatever Mihawk was talking about. And also, like I talked about before, maybe it's Buggy that meets Emu. He's the one that returns with the will of Rox. I mean, it's going to be Blackbeard, but maybe both. I don't know. After this, we see how, like, Rox rose to power more. Like, he sabotaged some Celestial Dragon ships, but also other pirate ships. He used the Davy Back fight to strengthen his crew, and that's what eventually gave him, like, the big powerhouse crew that he has that we've known about. And I guess he's just been trying to collect all these powerful people so that he can raid Mary Schwa and take it down. Because, you know, like we talked about in the last video, he's like the, you know, counterpart to Roger. He's the other side of the D coin. Roger, you know, went through the alternative route of trying to save the world, going on an adventure, finding the One Piece, you know, actually achieving it, but then not doing anything. Because, you know, he couldn't. They came at the wrong time or whatever. So he needed to wait for the Messiah to come and the stars to align. But Rox, on the other hand, is like, nah, I'm just raiding this place with the strongest dudes that I can find, and I'm just going to overthrow the government, and then I'm going to become the king, and then that's how he kind of saves the world in his own anti-villain way, which is essentially what Blackbeard is trying to do right now, I guess. Now, yeah, I mean, it's not great, but, I mean, maybe the world that Rox ruled over would probably be better than Emu's world, right? I mean, I guess there wouldn't be slavery anymore. Rox would definitely abolish that. All right, in this chapter, we're continuing Loki's flashback, and we're seeing the Kuja Pirates. At this point in time, they were like a superstar idol pirate group, all super beautiful women, including Gloriosa, who we know currently in the series as Elder Neon. But at this point in her prime, she was ultra beautiful and the captain of the Kuja Pirates. Her first mate was also Shaki, who I guess at this point in time was considered to be like the most beautiful woman in the world. Now, another interesting thing about this sequence is another member of the crew that we're seeing, and that is Tritoma, who in parenthesis says that she's going to become the future Empress of Amazon Lily. Now, if you're not like a hardcore fan of One Piece, you'll see this character and you'll be like, oh, okay, just another random, you know, Kuja pirate. That's cool. But if you are hardcore, like really hardcore, then you'll see this character and be like, oh my god, that's Luffy's mother. So now let me break it down, of course, because this isn't the first time we've heard of Tritoma, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time. Actually, yeah, this is for sure the first time we are seeing her in the series. But her existence was first made known in Volume 109's SBS, where it said that after Shakuyaku abandoned her position as Empress and left Amazon Lily, you know, of course, because naturally she does, because she eventually winds up running Shaki's bar at Sabaody with Rayleigh, Tritoma became the new Empress. And when Gloriosa returned to the island with the Gorgon sisters who had been freed from slavery, Tritoma pardoned her for her crime and allowed her to live on the island once again. Because Gloriosa leaves Amazon Lily at some point to join the Rocks Pirates, and then Shakuyaku succeeds her, and then once Shakuyaku leaves, then Tritoma, who allegedly could be Luffy's mother, takes over. Then, 13 years ago, she died from the love sickness and was succeeded as Empress by Boa Hancock. So that's pretty much all we know about her. And now we're also seeing that she was kind of like an assistant to Gloriosa here, bringing her like fan letters, or just a lower crew member or whatever. But nothing being said here that she's Luffy's mother, except that we kind of just have to put it together for ourselves. And in my opinion, it does make a lot of sense. Like, I'm fully convinced that Tritoma is Luffy's mother, because she dies of the love sickness here 13 years ago, which is also interesting because Luffy would have been alive still, at least for 6 years. And we've seen that love sickness runs amongst these empresses. I mean, it even happened to Hancock. She fell in love with Luffy, and that was happening to her. So it's very possible that Tritoma met Dragon at some point, and they, you know, fell in love and made Luffy. And that also would explain why Kuma sends Luffy to Amazon Lily You know, when he's sending all the Straw Hats all over the world during Sabaody arc, why would he send Luffy to Amazon Lily? Well, it's because he knew that Tritoma was his mother. Therefore, Amazon Lily is like his mother's family. Because, you know, Kuma is a revolutionary with Dragon, or at least he was. So it's very possible that he was there for all this stuff. And he always knew, you know, the truth about his family. I mean, why wouldn't he? But anyway, going further into this chapter, we're seeing the Roger pirates come across the Kuja pirates here, and they're fawning over Shakuyaku in a pretty comedic sequence until Garp shows up too. And for the first time, we finally get to see Garp and Roger just go at it. Like Garp does the real version of Meteor Fist. You know, that move that we saw him do to Luffy as Luffy was trying to escape after they had first met up after Enies Lobby. But then we just see them like straight up connecting in a clash. Like Garp hitting Roger in the face and Roger swinging his sword at Garp. I don't know if he's like slicing him or if he's making like a blunt impact the way that Rocks does. But really awesome sequence. Conqueror Hockey everywhere, of course. We know that these guys are like the gods of Conqueror Hockey for their time probably. And I really like this. I mean, other than it just being legends colliding here, but it also just shows like how much fun this era was. Like, I almost don't even want to leave this flashback, especially once we start getting into the Rock stuff after this. And I just can't wait to see this sequence in the anime, because I know they're going to make a feast out of the Sakuga on this. And also, I know I talked about this before, but for anyone who hasn't seen or wanted to just hear my thoughts or wanted to talk about it in the comment, who's stronger between Roger and Garp? It's really a pick'em. It's probably just 50-50. You know, like if they fought like 100 times, you know, they would win equally or a little bit more, something like that. But Roger seems reliant on his sword, which is interesting. And that could definitely play a factor into it because, you know, Garp doesn't need a sword. He just needs his fists and maybe, you know, some cannonballs. So then we cut away from that and we go through a little bit more Loki and King Harold stuff, but it gets really interesting again once we come back to Hachinosu, because we're seeing the rest of the Rock's pirates form here. Even some that we weren't aware of before, such as this guy Silver Axe, who at this point in time was known as Kyo the Wicked. And he's also referred to as Shiki's rival, which is awesome. We didn't know that Shiki had a rival. So it's just kind of showing us real quick how strong this guy is. He's not a weakling. He is really powerful if he is Shiki's rival. Now, I don't think Shiki was necessarily Yonko level power at this time, but in Chapter 0, Shiki is so powerful that he's able to fight like Garp and Sengoku at the same time. So that means at this point in time, he's probably pretty powerful. So this guy, you know, Kyo the Hitman, Silver Axe, pretty strong too. Then we're coming to Rocks, and he's talking to the rest of the crew who's come together at this point. It's also like Big Mom, Strusen, and Kaido, and then also another fishman by the name of Barbel, or Barbell. Yeah, I think his name's Barbell. But before I get into what Rocks says about his plan, Kaido is also in this conversation, and he's like talking back to Rocks, and he's like saying about how, you know, let's just use our strength to force Harold, you know, to join us or do what they want. And Rocks just kicks Kaido in the face. And he's like, never say that again. Harold's my boy. I'll crush you if you ever say that again. It's so hilarious, this like crazy bromance that Rocks has with Harold here. And it's really one-sided too. Like, Harold doesn't really like Rocks like that. And all they really did was just have a clash. It's like Rocks is attracted to Harold's power or something. But it's also, you know, awesome that he's just kicking Kaido in the face and, like, Kaido's just accepting it. I mean, yeah, Kaido's trying to fight back a little bit, but he's ultimately just accepting it. I mean, yeah, it's young Kaido, but still, I mean, it's freaking Kaido. But going into what Rocks is saying here about his plan, he's saying that there's 2 devil fruits that he's after. And that one of them is most likely on Elbaf. And that it'll only show its true power if Harold eats it. Now, we also talked about this before, but this is fascinating. So, Rocks needs these devil fruits because apparently they're the key to bringing down Marijois and the world government. Now, if one of them is at Elbaf and it's, you know, needs to be eaten by Harold, it's probably the devil fruit that Loki currently has, because, you know, that was said to be the legendary devil fruit passed down through Elbaf, and it was said that Loki ate it. Now, we still don't know what it is. We have no idea. But considering that Loki refers to himself as the sun god, it probably has something to do with Nika. And there's like a new theory that maybe it's like one half of the Nika fruit. Like maybe there's two variants of sun god Nika. As we've seen, there's two depictions of him. Maybe there's two devil fruit. Luffy has, sun god Nika A. And then maybe Loki has sun god Nika B or something. And then maybe you need to be a giant or something to bring out the full potential of the fruit, because he says that he needs Harold to eat it to bring out the full potential. And obviously Harold's a huge giant. I mean, he's ancient giant blood, much bigger than a regular giant. So maybe that is the key to bringing out the full potential, because when Luffy, goes into Gear 5, he becomes a giant sometimes anyway. So imagine if Harold did that. He'd be like, way bigger than Zunisha probably. Or Loki, I should say. What if Loki did that? Now, as for the other fruit, I guess it would have to be the Yami Yami no Mi, the Darkness Logia, because that's what Blackbeard was after. And we don't know specifically why he was after it, but if he is carrying on the will of Rox, or straight up has Rox's soul in him, then I guess this would make sense. Now, why does he need the Yami Yami no Mi and the Sun God Nika B fruit? Don't know. We're probably not going to find out in this flashback, but I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with this. So we're continuing the Rox and Loki flashback here, and we're somewhere between, I think, 48 and 42 years ago. I mean, we're going to be 42 years ago eventually in this chapter, but right now in the beginning, we're somewhere around there, and we're seeing like what the Rox pirates are known for, which is like essentially just being pirates and doing like pirate stuff. Which is funny, of course, because this is like a pirate manga, but sometimes you kind of forget. With the way that like the lore goes and the power system and the character designs and everything and the motivations of these characters. So it's like funny and refreshing kind of to see the Rox pirates in their prime in this chapter, because they are straight up, pirates, or what we typically know of what pirates do and are and look like almost as well. And of course, it's just an incredibly legendary crew. I just wish we could see more of this. Because, we're seeing like young Big Mom, Kaido, Whitebeard, Shiki, all like getting into shenanigans together. We're also seeing like who, I guess the initial traitor, quote unquote, of the Rox Pirates is in this chapter, and it's Shiki. So as like a portion of the Rox Pirates are escaping with like their treasure and whatnot, we see that Kaido and Whitebeard are like behind. They're like in a, below where they are. And Shiki decides to like drop a bomb on them. Like literally like a bomb. And he's like, this way the rest of us will get bigger cuts. Which is just like stupid because, Rox and Kaido are two of the strongest members of this crew. Like just kill off some other weaklings. Like I really doubt that the other new Rox pirates that we're introduced to lately are as strong as Whitebeard and Kaido. But anyway, it's just like a comical sequence, but also just further showing that the Rox pirates are just known for this. They didn't trust each other. They're all kind of like individually going out for their own goals, collectively using each other in a way, I guess. And they're all, like kind of crazy too. Where it goes from a range of like, I guess the craziest member of the Rox crew is Shiki, and then the least craziest member would be like Whitebeard. And then all of the other members would be in between there. Then we get some more exposition about the Rox pirates after the sequence ends, and it's like in a mere 2 years, they set the record for like 16 raids and 76 sunken ships and all these port raids, bringing nations down and unprecedented violations of Article 18 of international law. And it ultimately is just trying to say that this is like the era of Rox, this period in time. And it even goes out of its way to say, like, even though Roger was sailing the seas at this time, and he will eventually become the Pirate King, right now, this is Rox's time. And man, it was. Then we're coming back to Harold, and we're seeing that he's, like, helping this allied nation to Elbaf. This Anishi nation, or country. I don't know if we've seen them before. Maybe they've been mentioned before. I don't know. There's 1,157 chapters. It's possible that this has been said before, but I don't remember. But anyway, it's essentially just like a saving the cat moment for Harold here, because he goes against like the world government agent here and defends these people of Anishi. So it's setting up that like, okay, Harold is like a good guy for sure. He has come so far that seeing even a world government agent, act like a psychopath here, is enough to push him to just straight up impulsively try to save the other person being assaulted here. Despite knowing what's going to happen with Elbaf and how shaky the relationship is with the world government. So like I said, just setting up like, okay, Harold is capable of both siding with Rox, but also realizing the mistake he had made and why he is more vulnerable to the offer that is going to be made to him at the end of the chapter. But anyway, speaking of Rox, he comes back to Elbaf and he tries to recruit Harold again. I guess he especially thinks that this is a good time to try to get him because he read in the newspaper what we just talked about. You know, Harold attacking that world government agent, defending that allied nation. And Harold is explaining to Rox, like, you know, it's good that giants are spreading out from Elbaf and going into other countries. And he talks about John Giant, who we've seen, you know, during Marineford before. Apparently he was been in the Navy for 50 years at this point, which I didn't know. Maybe they said it before, I don't really remember, but it's just a shame he's never really gotten that strong over 50 years. But Harold sees this as like a benefit for the world overall. You know, spreading out the giants to every nation, you know, using their strength could make a difference for people everywhere. And Rox is like, he's on board with it. He's like, yeah, now that's terrifying. Rox is not a good person. He's like an anti-villain for sure, if anything. But also you can kind of see it as him just like sucking up to Harold. But you know, you also don't think Rox would do that. That's more of like a Blackbeard thing. Rox seems to be like a straight shooter. Then we're coming to the Navy HQ and we're seeing Kong talking to Garp, Sengoku, and Osaru. So at this point in time, I thought that Kong would have been the fleet admiral and Sengoku would have been an admiral, but no. The three of them are actually vice admirals. Well, of course, I mean, Garp and Otsuru, of course, vice admirals, but so is Sengoku still, and Kong is an admiral. So according to some supplementary info, it could be a Viver card or something like that, I'm pretty sure it confirms that Kong eventually becomes the fleet admiral, and then as it says in this chapter, he will eventually become the commander-in-chief, as we've seen him currently in the story. And it makes you wonder, like, who are the other admirals at this point in time? I doubt Oda's even going to show us, because one of them was killed by Rox recently, and then I guess there's got to be at least another one, right? There always has to be 3 or something, at least 3, is that like the rule? But they're just talking about Rox and how giants joining the Navy is just a beneficial thing overall. They're just establishing like, hey, we're good guy. We're not evil like the world government. Then coming into the end of the chapter, we find out that Shaki has quit the Kuja Pirate, has set up her ripoff bar on Hachinosu, and this is now officially 42 years ago. So that means that we're pretty close to God Valley at this point, because it was 38 years ago. So we're 4 years away from the God Valley incident. But anyway, Shaki has set up her ripoff bar on Hachinosu, and it's very possible that she left them because she's, I don't know, using this as a way to, I don't know, wind up with Rayleigh in some way, but not succumb to the love sickness, or maybe this is related to the love sickness in some way, possibly. Because when Gloriosa and Big Mom are talking about this, Big Mom's like, do you reckon she quit so she could chase after a man? I do think that could possibly be a hint to Rayleigh, for sure, but I don't know, maybe there's some other kind of ulterior motive that will eventually be revealed in a couple years. But there has to be some significance to Shaki opening up this place at Hachinosu and her becoming like a treasure to the people there. But anyway, at the very end of the chapter, we see that the Gorosei are relaying a message to Harold saying that, hey, if you want Elbaf to be accepted into the world government, then you gotta have the warriors of Elbaf kill Rox. So I don't know if this is like going to be the best translation, because when we got the spoilers a couple days ago, it said that the Gorosei requested Harold himself to kill Rox, but now it's saying the warriors of Elbaf, and that kind of makes more sense. But also I think it would have been better writing if he was just straight up asking Harold to kill Rox. But we'll see what happens with that. But either way, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Harold attacking that guy defending that allied nation of Elbaf. It's like, of course, he knows that he's in a very critical situation right now. He wants to do the best for Elbaf. He wants to spread out the warriors into the world and help people. But in order to do that, he needs to be accepted into the world government. And he knows that Rox is like a piece of crap. but he's like a piece of crap with a heart of gold. Like, he kind of likes Rox. I mean, why would he let him around his family and all that stuff if he didn't? He just doesn't want to join him, and he doesn't trust him completely. So it's like, is he going to do it? Will he do it? Because Rox does die. It's heavily implied that he's dead right now. I mean, I think it's straight up said that he's dead. You know, other than the grand theories of his soul being in Blackbeard, I mean, pretty sure Rox is dead. We don't know who killed him yet, but at this point, it could be Giants or Harold. My money is still on it has something to do with Garling, but we'll see. On the cover page, we see the grave that Yamato visited in Wano belonged to a man named Kozuki Moriya. This reveals that Gecko Moriya's true name is Kozuki Moriya. I know I talked about this a few times, guys, but this is just for anyone that is visiting this video today and didn't want to go over the spoilers. And yes, this means that it is nearly confirmed that Moriya is related to Odin and the rest of the Kozukis from Wano. And considering that the Kozuki clan invented the poneglyph writing and carved it into the poneglyphs themselves and then taught the rest of their family how to read and write poneglyphs, it is very likely that Moriya himself knows how to read and write the poneglyphs. Therefore, the popular theory at this point in time is that Moriya will join Buggy's Cross Guild and become their poneglyph reader. Then continuing the Loki/Rox flashback, we're coming to the Roger Pirates on the Sea, and we find out that Shaki has been sick, or at least Roger thinks that she is. And it's very likely due to the quote-unquote love sickness, because it turns out that Shaki loves Rayleigh. She gave him a note that says, "Come and make me yours." But it turns out that Rayleigh doesn't want to get quote-unquote tied down. He is interested in her, but he's not really looking for commitment at this point. He's looking for short-term fun. Roger, however, does want the commitment, and he's looking for a long-term partner. So now that Rayleigh doesn't want Shaki, I guess Roger's like, I guess I can have her, bro. It's cool, right? We'll just trade, girls. Even though she wanted you and not wanted me, let's go to Hachinosu, the pirate island, where her ripoff bar is currently, and then let me try to woo her. Also, let me point out at this point, there is an insane age difference between Shaki and Rayleigh and Roger. I don't even know if I could say it in this video, but look it up for yourself or check the comments. It's pretty wild. Anyway, they wind up going to Hachinosu and they see Shaki there, of course, and we see her running the rip-off bar. Rox is there, of course, because that's like his headquarters, Hachinosu. And we find out that Rox is no longer interested in Shaki because he got his own lady and wound up making Blackbeard. Or at least it's heavily implied that Blackbeard was made, quote unquote, at this point. They don't say that it is Teach or whatever. I mean, I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't be naming him right now. But I just want to point out it is very possible that it's also Buggy that was, being made here. But it's most likely Blackbeard. But Roger and his crew bust into the bar trying to woo Shaki, of course, but then Roger runs into Rox, and we get this incredible first-time interaction between them. Well, at least from what we've seen. They've probably interacted or clashed a few times at this point. At least they seem to know each other already. Because Rox is like, Roger, how many times do I gotta tell you that this is my island? Then Roger's like, we can't fight in Shaki's bar, so shut up, Porcupine. And this is really cool, of course, because like I said before, it's like The Rock and Stone Cold coming together. And while we're not getting that big WrestleMania main event right now, once we get to God Valley, which possibly might be the next chapter or two, we are going to see these two fight, and it's going to be incredible. But the sequence ends with Shaki denying Roger, as she should, and we knew that that was going to happen because Roger would eventually go on to marry, or I don't know if he married her, but get with Portgas D. Rouge and wound up making Ace with her. But we also find out that Rayleigh decided to stay on the ship and not interact with Shaki because, he didn't want to get tied down. But it's very possible this also plays into how Shaki survived the love sickness. The very same love sickness that we were told killed the previous Empress of Amazon Lily, who in my opinion is very likely to be Luffy's mother. And, her love for Dragon got her killed. Same thing that we saw happening with Boa Hancock. She developed the love sickness for Luffy, but, Luffy, whatever he did, thwarted it. I guess you need to, friend zone the woman, and then that cures the love sickness. I mean, this is just typical Oda stuff. I'm not a white knight, guys, but, come on, Oda. Get with the times, brother. Anyway, we're cutting to our boy Garling, and I say that loosely because, he's like a racist psychopath, but he's talking to the Gorosei, and he says that he found this really cool place, which is God Valley. It's actually really funny how he states it. He's like, we briefly stopped at that island. It's not affiliated state, but it has some unique culture. And it's like people in the One Piece world must get like annoyed sometimes when people are talking because they always speak ambiguously like this. They're like, that man, that island. It's like, hey, just say what it is. Okay, just say what it is. Where'd you go? God Valley? Is that where you went? Just say it. Anyway, this is like a pretty interesting place because, he says unique culture. He tried offering them a membership into the world government, but they declined. They also have a bunch of abundant resources, which are valuable for the world government, of course, but they also made an outrageous discovery. It was completely unexpected, and Garling thinks that Emu would be very pleased with this. Therefore, he wants to have the big hunting game take place 2 years later at God Valley, which, of course, eventually happens and leads to the God Valley incident, as we saw in Kuma's flashback. Now, what is this crazy cool thing that he found there? We have no idea. It probably has something to do with the Void Century or the Ancient Kingdom, I'm assuming, because I think God Valley as a whole has something to do with that. Joy Boy, his joyous boys, their lineage probably has been carried down to God Valley to this day. They're probably living in like their own little version of North Korea possibly, but it's not like a dictatorship. But now we're coming to the big crazy fight of this chapter because we're going a little bit ahead in time and we're coming to Rox fighting Harold at Elbaf. Turns out in the previous chapter that Harold was made an offer by the Gorosei to straight up assassinate Rox. I don't know if assassinating is the right term, but just, kill him. Like they wanted to put a hit out on Rox and have Harold do the job because, they don't like Rox. He's too cool. He's like not keeping their matrix intact. And plus, he knows who Emu is, and he already declared that he was going to come back and take them down. So yeah, Rock's got to go. Also, he's a freaking D. Also, he's the freaking GOAT. But it's like, hey, Harold, you kill Rox, and we'll let Elbaf flourish. We'll let you join the world government. We'll let you join the military and all that stuff. And you can be part of the reverie, and, we'll chill with you. We'll let you be a king and all that stuff. And we'll leave you alone. Just kill Rox. And Harold was like, all right, bet. I'll do it, because he says he was torn. He's conflicted. Rox is his friend. He finally admits it in this chapter. I mean, Rox was obviously way more into Harold than vice versa, but still, it freaking sucks. Rox loved Harold, and Harold is just going at him, trying to kill him for the greater good of what he believes of Elbaf, because he's like, I'm a king, I got to do this. And Rox, of course, continuing being the GOAT, he's like, is this really something worth killing your friend over? And in the end, you just bow down to them? You're being used by them, you idiot. What happened to your warrior's pride? And Harold's like, our warriors created a history of violence. Elbaf is shackled by it, held back from achieving true peace. So that's why he feels that he has to do this. It's bigger than just Harold, or at least he believes that it is. He's trying to save his entire country here, and he felt like, hey, Rox is a bad guy anyway. He's a villain, as he says. So if I kill him, it's not really that big of a deal. But it is. Because you could have teamed up with Rox and took down the world government, probably. I mean, I don't know if you guys could defeat Emu because she has, ridiculously hack powers that, maybe only Luffy can defeat at the end game. But you guys would have gotten really close. But a part in this sequence that I especially like is towards the end of the fight. When Harold is trying to defend the Celestial Dragons, he's like, listen, no matter how foolish they are, they still have influence in the world to bring Elbaf into the loop. And Rox is like, stop it! He grabs his head. He's like, you cowardly rat! It's like, man, this is such a great sequence. So much emotion conveyed in these panels. Oda really likes Rox. I mean, you could tell. I mean, we all like Rox. He's my new favorite character. But Oda really going out of his way to make Rox the best character in the series. Him just hearing Harold speak kindly of the Celestial Dragon, trying to rationalize their sociopathy. He's like, stop it, you cowardly rat! And then he blasts him. So good. And then after that, he's like, you know what, Harold? Screw you, man. You're not getting another invite from me. Business is closed. And Harold's like, yeah, I'm a king. All right, I can't throw away my people's lives by following a villain like you. And that was it. The battle ended in a draw. They didn't want to kill each other. And that's it. Rox left and he didn't come back. But now that the fight's over, let me just point out that this might be the strongest fight we've ever actually seen play out in the series at this point. I mean, maybe not the strongest thing ever. I mean, the strongest thing that we've ever seen was probably when Joy Boy's Haki was released from that knot of Emeth that blew away the Gorosei. And then, aside from that, just Emu showing their power. That's, implied to be the strongest character in the series. But other than that, just us seeing two characters fight, I do think this might be the strongest ever. I mean, yeah, Roger and Whitebeard clashing in Odin's flashback happens many years after this, so the power scale was very different. However, we don't know who was stronger between those two eras or whatever. You know what I mean? And right now, it seems like Rox and Harold are number 1 and number 2 on the pound for pound scale, outside of like Garling and Emu. And we don't really get to see top pound for pound guys actually have a real fight. I mean, granted, we're just seeing like clashes and whatever. Oda was never really great at drawing fights. He kind of just lets Toei, pick up the slack for him, I guess. And that's totally fine. Oda's been doing this for over 20 years. He can just do whatever he wants. But yeah, this might be the strongest fight we've ever seen up until this point. Then at the end of the chapter, we come to God Valley 39 years ago. And we see the inhabitants there, and there's like this woman in a stroller, and everybody's like, fawning over her. We don't see her face. She's just a typical Oda woman from the back. She could be Nami. But anyway. It turns out that the kids in this stroller are Shanks and Shamrock. That's right. This is their mother. Which means, at least it seems that way, that Shanks and Shamrock's mother is not a celestial dragon. It seems like she is an inhabitant of God Valley. And when Garling went there, he wooed her. I at least hope this was consensual because, the way that Garling and the Celestial Dragons are. And if it was consensual, that means that Shanks and Shamrock's mom literally hooked up with a psychopath. And maybe she's not such a good person herself, or maybe Garling love-bombed her and gaslit her and made her think that he wasn't a psychopath, but the deed was done. And it seems like Shanks and Shamrock are half Celestial Dragons and half possibly D. This woman might be a D. I've had that theory for a while. It seems likely, could be wrong, but at minimum, they are just half not Celestial Dragon. So this chapter opens up 39 years ago, which is like the time of the God Valley incident. That's because I'm pretty sure the next chapter we're actually going to see what happened in the God Valley incident finally. It's also revealed that Shaki had been kidnapped from Hachinosu, and that Don Marlin had been killed. I guess he was trying to protect her or something, which is, cool. Rest in peace, GOAT. Now, here's the part where I messed up. I'm sorry. And I'm sure you guys were really upset at me for this. I didn't really notice what I had did until I actually read the chapter. So, it turns out the traitor is Ochoko, and I was like, oh, that's Silver Axe, because, I'm an idiot, and I was just associating Ochoko with Silver Axe being the same person. Ochoko is this weird looking guy with the tongue and the neck. It's not Silver Axe. I'm sorry, Silver Axe. I didn't mean to accuse you of kidnapping Shaki and selling out Rox pirates. You're still cool. You might even be Das Bones' dad. That would be cool. Anyway, Ochoko is this weird guy. He kidnapped Shaki, sold her to the world government, and then he got money in return. And going off of what we know about the Rocky Port incident, he apparently was running Hachinosu after everything was said and done. After the God Valley incident, where it's implied that Rox dies. I hope he doesn't. We'll see. But there was a power vacuum, obviously, and I guess Ochoko took over that power vacuum and then kind of just ran Hachinosu until the Rocky Port incident, which I think happened during the time skip. In between Marineford and Fishman Island. I could be wrong about that. But it was Kobe was there, Law was there, and Blackbeard was there. And Blackbeard wind up killing Ochoko. And now we know why. It's because he did all this stuff. He screwed over the Rox pirates, stole Shaki. So this was a long time revenge coming. Also goes into the theory that Rox is inside of Blackbeard. We'll talk about that at the end of the chapter. We already talked about it before, but there's another thing that I want to mention with that because I think it is pretty interesting. But anyway, Shaki being kidnapped here is partly the catalyst for the God Valley incident, or everyone converging there. Partly, not the main reason. There's other factors, of course. But Shaki being kidnapped was a really big deal at this time. She was like the Sabrina Carpenter of her time, or the Taylor Swift of her time, essentially. Like, super popular. Everybody knows her. Everybody wants her. Like, apparently even the economy was suffering when she got kidnapped. Anyway, it turns out that she's going to be like a prize at God Valley. More so kind of just being set up to be Garling's wife. Because if you win the hunting game at God Valley, then you get to have Shockey as your wife or slave. I mean, the whole hunting game is just killing innocent civilians in their own home country. But Garling is like the most powerful guy that the Celestial Dragons have. At least it's implied. Besides like the Gorosei Emu. So it's guaranteed that he's essentially going to win. But we know that Shockey doesn't marry him. So something happens and Shockey winds up in Sabaody with Rayleigh. But anyway, speaking of Garling, we're coming back to him, and he's coming to God Valley again because, he's setting up the whole hunting game and everything, and he runs into Shanks and Shamrock's mom. The implication here is that he kind of knocked her up and then dipped, which is pretty realistic, I guess. And Shanks and Shamrock's mom is, like, asking him to, like, hey, why don't you live here with us? Look, you have twins. Shamrock didn't even know he had twins. And he's like, oh, that's cute. They're adorable. And he's like, nah, I'm not living here. This place sucks. Also, we're going to, destroy it. And I'm marrying, someone way hotter than you. And then he just stabs her. Yeah. Garling. Man. He's going for that number one most despicable villain spot in the series. Which is really impressive because we have a lot of despicable villains in this series. And Garling, man, he might... I don't know. Is he number one right now? This has to be the most evil thing I've ever seen in this series. And I don't know. Is he more evil than Doflamingo, Kaido, Emu? I mean, we only have implications of what Emu has done. But Garling, I mean, he, no soul, no face, no expression, just stabbed her like he was killing, a fly or something. I don't know. Maybe people even have more emotion killing insects than that. But anyway, like we talked about before, this was guaranteed to happen to Shanks and Shamrock's mom because she is a mother in this series. And the only mother that gets to live is Big Mom, even though she died. But especially the mothers of important characters. They must die. Whether they're killed or they die of some illness. They're not allowed to live. We're not allowed to know anything about them. I mean, Shanks and Shamrock's mom, we don't even see her face. We probably won't. I just hope it's revealed that she's a D, because that would mean that, Shanks and Shamrocks are half Celestial Dragon, half D. They would be the only individuals that we know of in the series that are that combination. And I guess it would go more into what Rayleigh was saying to Shanks in the beginning of this flashback. The day when King Harold was killed, they were, bathing, and Rayleigh called Shanks the child of destiny. And I thought, oh, is it because he's half D, half Celestial Dragon? Or is it just because Roger found him? Anyway, we're coming to God Valley now, and we're seeing, the world government ships, the marine ships, all coming there to set it up. They're bringing slaves so, they can get killed. And, the marines and just the security, everything's coming there. But it turns out that we're seeing young Dragon here. Monkey D. Dragon, father of Luffy, leader of the Revolutionary Army. We're finally getting to see what he was like as a Marine. And yeah, he was still very much goth at this point in time. Has the eyeliner, very stoic, Because, we talked about this before. In the Monkey D family, Dragon is like the goth, brother or whatever. The goth cousin, son. I don't know. Because, Garp and Luffy are very similar, but he's Dragon. But we're seeing at this point in time, he's just a recruit. And he's talking back to his superior, because he doesn't understand why they're doing this. I mean, granted, they're setting up innocent people to be killed, executed for the purpose of a game. I mean, I don't know if he fully understands what's going on yet, but he just knows that he needs to get all of these citizens at God Valley round up. So obviously he's not trying to hurt them. He's just using tranquilizers, and it's hey, if you don't resist, we'll just, take you into custody and that's it. Anyway, it just goes to show that Dragon, he was always a good guy. Better than Garp, because Dragon, as we know, eventually leaves the Marines. I'm pretty sure he leaves after whatever happens at the God Valley incident, because there's going to be some sus stuff going on for sure. Garp stays, but Dragon leaves. So depending on what Dragon does, he might have a great redemption here. It was easy to rag on Dragon all of these years because He never does anything, and I don't know, he kind of sucks, to be honest, but maybe he doesn't. I want him to be cool. So anyway, now everybody is going to God Valley. You know, Rox obviously knows that Shockey had been kidnapped, and he's on his way to go save her. Roger finds out, he's on his way. You know, Roger's in love with Shockey. And then when Garp finds out that Roger's going, he's like, all right, bet, I'm going, because Garp loves Roger the way that, like, Rox loves Harold. And as Rox is on his way to God Valley, he runs into Harold's ship, Speak of the Devil. Harold was apparently, I don't know, like the gatekeeper at this point, like sent to intercept Rox. There's like even marine ships here making sure that Harold does the deed. And instead of fighting, they wind up just talking. And they share sake as they talk. And I think this is supposed to, not even think, this is for sure supposed to directly parallel to the meeting that Roger and Whitebeard had. I think it was a little bit before Roger was publicly executed, right? It was after he had discovered Laugh-Tale and everything, and he wound up meeting with Whitebeard, and they shared sake and they talked, and I think it was in that instance when he told Whitebeard his real name was Gold D. Roger. I'm pretty sure, right? He also told him about the One Piece, but like Whitebeard didn't want to know about it. But same thing happening here. Rox telling Harold that his real name is Davy D. Xebec, because he comes from the Davy family lineage, which goes back to Davy Jones 800 years ago, which is the Void Century. And Davy Jones this whole time was a D. Pretty fascinating stuff, right? We talked about Davy Jones ad nauseum at this point. Well, we'll talk about him one more time. The first time I think we hear about him is in Long Ring, Long Land. Say that 18 times fast. Robin mentions him. I don't even know if they say this in the anime. I think it just might be in the manga. But Robin says Davy Jones is a pirate from long ago who was cursed by the devil to live in the depths of the seafloor, where it is said he yet lives to this day. Any sunken ships or treasure get locked away in Davy Jones' locker. So that's really interesting, right? It makes you think, like, is that literally what had happened? Is he still alive down there? Don't know. But being cursed by the devil, I think 100% means Emu. Emu is the devil in this series. Sea devil, devil, whatever. It's always been Emu, in my opinion. And Emu did something to curse Davy Jones because Davy Jones was a D, and I'm sure he was working actively to take Emu down the same way that Joy Boy was. Because at this point, Davy Jones was the Blackbeard of the Void Century, the way that Joy Boy was the Luffy of the Void Century. Both Ds. It's even possible they were brothers. But considering that they were both Ds and how the 2D lineages or the 2D lines like diverge, you know, we've got superhero good guy Luffy and we've got anti-hero Blackbeard. Same thing with Rox and Roger. It seems like they're both working towards the same goal. Joy Boy and Davy Jones back in the day trying to overtake Emu and the Celestial Dragons and all that stuff, but they just couldn't agree. And they both decided to go in their own ways. One will led to Luffy and one will led to Blackbeard. Now, Rox also reveals that Blackbeard, who we knew that he had just recently had with some unnamed woman, is now 2 years old now, and that they live on God Valley. He like put them there to keep them safe. But also, Rox himself comes from God Valley, which is super fascinating. We still don't know why God Valley is important. We know that it has a lot of natural resources and all that stuff, but there's a reason it's called God Valley. There's a reason why that big split is in that pillar mountain thing. So it's very likely that that's where Joy Boy and Davy Jones had something. Maybe that was like their Hachinosu or something, you know, possibly. So this is like the other reason why Rox is going to God Valley. He's trying to protect his family, which means that Blackbeard is going to be at the God Valley incident. And his mom is too, and she's probably going to die. But Blackbeard obviously doesn't die. And this might be where we see, through somehow, Rox puts his soul into Blackbeard and continues to live on. And it could have already happened already. Davy Jones could have already put his soul into Rox somehow. I don't know how. There's tons of possibilities. Let me know in the comments. Could be some kind of hockey soul manipulation. There could be some kind of devil fruit trickery going on. Personality switch stuff. Who knows? We'll find out if it even is a thing. And I say that because, you know, that was like the biggest theory for the longest time. Blackbeard had 3 souls in him, the 3 skulls. Now we know the 3 skulls for sure is Davy Jones, Rox, and Blackbeard. But it's like, to what degree does that mean, you know? Are they literally inside of him? Because it does seem like Blackbeard's personality changes sometimes. Like, When he's talking to Luffy on Jaya, like in that first sequence when they meet after the whole cherry pie thing, you know, the whole thing where he's like, pirates' dreams never die. That could very likely be Rocks. Like, if you told me right now, or if Oda was like, yeah, that was Rocks talking, I would be like, of course it was. That's Rocks. Because sometimes when we see Blackbeard, he's just like a sniveling little coward, which is fine. I'm not against that. But it's just, it would be cool if Rocks is still alive. He's the best character in the series. But anyway, after that, Harold just lets Rocks go. Obviously, he was supposed to fight him and stop him, but, you know, he's like, look, I can't join you and help you at God Valley, but my last act of kindness to you for our weird friendship that we've had is that I'll just let you go. Go ahead. And he does. And Rocks goes on to God Valley. And coming into the end of the chapter here, we see, as we talked about, Shaki is being displayed as the prize for God Valley. The winner of the tournament will get her. We're seeing the other Holy Knights there, like a young Summers too. Coming into the end of the chapter, we see Dragon going to where Blackbeard and his mother are being held. They are slaves at God Valley right now. They've already been captured. And Blackbeard's mother, talking to Dragon, is like, take my son, get him out of here. Don't let him fall into that guy's hands. Not sure who she's talking about. I don't think she's talking about Rocks. But we find out that besides Shaki, the other prize is Teach himself. Because they know that he is from the Davy D clan that went back to the Void Century. Apparently he's the last surviving member besides Rocks. And this very likely could be what Garling was talking about, that he founded God Valley. The last remnants of the Davy clan. Right? Because he said, hey, I found something at God Valley that Emu would like. It's got to be that. I mean, it could be something else, but it seems likely. So, wow, we've got quite the chapter here today because it is pretty brutal. The hunting game on God Valley is beginning, and Oda is not holding back here, and I like it. I mean, I don't like what the Celestial Dragons are doing, but I like that Oda is not holding back with it, even though it's probably not really going to lead to any comeuppance for them, but we'll get into that. I can't really talk too much about this stuff because we're still in the first minute of the video, and, you know, YouTube's really sensitive with that stuff, but we are seeing Blackbeard and his mom in the beginning of the chapter here, because they are being advertised as like these big kills. They're worth a lot of points in the hunting game because they're a part of the Davy clan. You know, it was revealed that Rocks comes from the Davy D. Jones lineage. Davy Jones was like this legendary guy back in the Void Century. He is very likely to be the Blackbeard to Joy Boy. And based off of how much they are despised and hated by the Celestial Dragons, we can assume that they tried to take down Emu back in the day, right? That's like their whole thing. So now their whole lineage is cursed. I'm not sure how the Davy clan was able to survive on God Valley for 800 years here, but they were. I mean, it was a pretty isolated nation. And speaking of that, we're getting to see other members of the Davy clan here, such as Blackbeard's mother, who looks kind of like Robin, and some other unnamed characters who look very interesting, and we'll get into that. But another thing that is being mentioned here by the Celestial Dragons in the audience is that they're questioning if they are Buccaneers as well. It's like, are they Buccaneers too? And I think that means that they are. Because if Oda just put that out there as like a misdirect or something, it would just confuse the audience, who is already confused in the first place with all of this lore and stuff. So it's better to just say that they are Buccaneers, because it seems like they are. You know, because if Kuma is confirmed to be a Buccaneer, Blackbeard has like the same type of body, and this guy right here has the same type of body, right? We talked about a huge upper body, skipping leg day forever, you know, like the Mr. Incredible physique. Or what is that? Is that Mr. Incredible? Is that the guy from the Incredible movie, you know, the big high school football coach looking dude? But speaking of this guy, he has a straw hat on. And I don't think it's a coincidence, because, you know, the straw hat is kind of like the brand of this manga, right? And it makes me go back to thinking that Joy Boy may have been a Buccaneer as well. And we thought about that because the straw hat at Mary Joie that Emu is holding seems to be pretty freaking big, right? Bigger than what a normal human in this series would wear. So we thought, oh, he's got to be a giant. But as time went on, it was revealed that the Buccaneers were a thing. We thought, oh, maybe he's a Buccaneer too. So maybe he is, because, you know, this Buccaneer guy's wearing a straw hat. And either the straw hat comes from Joy Boy or it comes from Davy Jones as well. And it goes into what I was saying about how maybe they're brothers. I don't know. We'll see. But we're coming into the hunting game here.
And as I said, it is brutal. There's one particular sequence where this like Charlos looking idiot is like straight up like brutally murdering a family with a baby. And they're like pleading their lives. Please spare our child. And he's just like, and he just... I like that Oda is showing us this. This is straight seinen territory, obviously. You know, seinen as opposed to shonen, which I guess seinen would be like with the YA of battle manga, right? We're also seeing Garling just brutally murdering people as we knew that he was capable of. And then even Summers here is like killing a child in front of his father, like having him fall onto thorns. And it makes me wonder, like, where is all of this going? Are they really going to get their comeuppance? Because, I don't know, do most despicable villains in this series really get their comeuppance, to be honest? I mean, Doflamingo is still alive, and he's done awful things. Like, realistically, the Celestial Dragons should all be publicly executed for their crimes, right? Once their regime is overthrown. But I really don't think Oda is going to do that. He's just going to kind of, I guess, force them to just live normal lives, right? He would think that's a great punishment for them. But what kind of lesson does that teach? And I'm not talking about the kids. Because, you know, teaching lessons to kids in stories like this is always just cookie cutter stuff. And it never really matters anyway, because it's not like it betters humanity. I think it would be better to teach people, like, bad things happen to bad people. So I just hope Oda doesn't decide to go, like, full-blown Disney at the end of this series with the Celestial Dragons. Like, this chapter just makes you angry, right? And you just want to see them die, right? Speaking of that, Dragon straight up shoots one of the Celestial Dragons with a tranquilizer dart, saving Kuma and Ivankov here, which is awesome. Young dragon, he was him. Older dragons kind of sucks. He's boring, whatever. But maybe when we come back to him in real time, his fire will be reignited because now we're seeing how cool he was in his youth. But I'm assuming this is what led to Dragon leaving the Marines for sure. Because, you know, they will find out that one of the Celestial Dragons was shot by the tranquilizer dart. So, of course, they would kill Dragon on the spot as well as his platoon, I guess. But now we're coming to the really awesome part of the chapter where the Rocks pirates show up kind of like heroes here. I mean, they are. Rocks is like the real hero of this story, to be honest. I mean, they're there to save Shaki and take the devil fruits and the treasure and everything, but they are indirectly saving all of the slaves here who are getting brutally murdered. And it goes back to what Sengoku said about the God Valley incident. Roger and Garp teamed up to fight Rocks to defend the Celestial Dragons. If that actually happens, I wonder if Oda realizes what he is doing there. I mean, I know not all of the readers see this story through my lens, but you really gotta wonder, like, does he think that if he does that, people are still going to like Roger and Garp? It can't be that black and white, right? There has to be something that happens that protects their characters, because we'll just see what happens. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But right after this, we're seeing Dragon successfully save Shanks and Shamrock, you know, as their babies, which he got from their dying mother. This is eventually going to lead to Shanks winding up in the treasure chest and Shamrock winding up with Garling. But we're also seeing the Roger pirates show up, Garp and the Marines showing up, and the God Knights showing up. So all of the factions are here. And I want to talk about the God Knights real quick because this is the first time we're seeing all of them. So we see the man-mayor chick with the rifle. We saw her before. We saw this one chick with the navel exposed. We saw her before. We got Summers. And then we see the guy with like a bull mask, bull skull mask, whatever. We've seen him before, but now we're seeing two new members. And then we've got this one woman with horns that kind of looks like Killingham, right? This might be Killingham's mom, possibly. She also has like a cigar. Is this Crocodile's mom? No. That would be cool though, right? And then we see like this, I guess Redon was accurate in saying it looks like a freaking Yeti. I don't know if this is like their devil fruit form or if they're just actually like some kind of Yeti creature that's like a new race that's being revealed here. I'm going to say that this is probably their devil fruit, you know, like mythical Zoan Yeti, because at this point, like we've established, all of the top tiers are going to have mythical Zoan devil fruits. But the chapter ends with like Garp throwing one of his cannonballs right into like ground zero and blowing like everyone apart. Well, pirates, at least. Obviously, he's not hurting civilians. Definitely not hurting the Celestial Dragons. And we see Rox and Roger reacting to it. So I guess this is like the beginning of the all-out battle between Garp, Rox, Roger, and Garling and their crews. I talked about this before as well. How much of this are we actually going to see? To be honest, I really want to get your hopes up, guys. I mean, maybe in the anime we'll see a lot of it, but that's going to be in like 3 years from now, 2-3 years. But in the manga, in 2 weeks from now, we're probably just going to see a bunch of clashes, a bunch of lightning. I hope that we get to see more than that, but I just don't see it happening. We will see the results of things at least, but the actual fights themselves, probably not so much. So we are seeing some pretty significant things in this chapter, such as Garp's ridiculous display of power. Like, it's clearly showing us that he is far and above, way stronger than most of the cast at this point. And that's pretty wild because most of the cast in this flashback are some of the strongest characters to ever exist in this series. We're also seeing some other fights, I guess. I mean, it's what I expected, you know, clash, lightning, one panel, move on, which it is what it is. You know, Toei will pick up the slack in 2 years once they eventually adapt this into the anime. So in the beginning here, we're seeing that Dragon does have Shanks and Shamrock as babies, but he's being shot at by one of the Holy Knights by the name of Saint Maffy from the Satchel family. She strikes that nice balance of what is known in Japan as yami kawaii, kind of. And she has like this beam coming out of her mouth. I don't know if it's a devil fruit or if it's a cyborg augmentation, probably a devil fruit. Also, I don't know why she has horns and sharp teeth. It could be her bloodlines mixing together, or it could also be a part of the devil fruit. Her hair also has like a volcano kind of top to it. That's probably like insight into her abilities or background or something, because that's like what Oda does. But getting shot by, you know, Saint Maffy causes Dragon to drop little baby Shanks, and he hits his head. And that made me think, oh, I guess that's why Shanks doesn't grow up to be a psychopath like the rest of the Celestial Dragons, because CTE, which, you know, I talked about this before, but it's pretty funny because in real life, the more brain trauma or CTE that you accrue, it makes you more likely to become a psychopath. But in anime world, as we've seen with Goku, you know, destined to be a world-conquering Saiyan, he bumped his head as a baby. It was actually a big bump. And he wound up becoming Meathead Babyface Savior of the Universe. But this is when the Rox pirates come in to save the day, kind of accidentally, because Whitebeard is just blowing through the forest here, trying to get to where Shaki is, I guess. And him doing that cuts directly through Mafi, who, you know, has like the Holy Knight Emu regeneration stuff going on. And I guess it just means that this makes them more susceptible to being damaged. It's also just another way for Oda to show that they have regeneration. But what ultimately happens is Maffy gets Shamrock, and that's how, you know, Shamrock grows up to be Shamrock, and Dragon gets Shanks and saves him, and that's, of course, how Shanks grows up to be Akagami. But going more into this sequence, we get to see Big Mom, Whitebeard, Kaido, and Shiki all working together to fight against these NPC pirates. It's just, I don't like this sequence because it just doesn't make sense. They're like going after the Rox pirates because they're like, oh, if we can take them down, we'll be famous. I appreciate that we get to see the Rox pirates, you know, this quartet especially, all working together, because otherwise we'll never be able to see this in the series. Yes, it is one panel as I expected, but it's still cool nonetheless. Then we're getting to the big title in the thumbnail of this chapter, and it's because Garp, coincidentally, comes across this group, and he just goes right in and starts dropping fist nukes on them. And this is very cool. I don't like Garp. I already ragged on him enough in my 2 previous reviews for the spoilers, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse in this video. But the one issue that I have with this sequence outside of Garp as a character is that Whitebeard literally runs away from Garp here. And I don't know who's saying this because the speech bubble is ambiguous, but it says, it's Garp, run, a fight with him will drag on too long. First of all, it's like, drag on too long for what? I know you're there to get Shaki, but you could just stay there and fight him for 3 minutes. It's 4-on-1. Or I guess at this point it's 3-on-1. Kaido, Big Mom, and Whitebeard versus Garp. It doesn't seem like that's too unrealistic of a fight to have. But the main thing here is Whitebeard running away. He literally runs away from a fight with Garp. Now, why is that problematic? Well, it's because during Marineford, Whitebeard was built up to be this fearless goat pirate, right? And he still is to a degree. But his whole sequence where he dies goes to show that he had no marks on his back because he, like, essentially never turned to his opponents or never ran away. That was the implication, right? But clearly, he ran away from Garp like a coward. And yes, I guess he's not getting damaged from this, so his back is still pristine. But still, I think this is like diminishing Whitebeard's character. And again, psycho YouTuber, I look way too much into this stuff. The casual will never think about stuff like this. But you are on the hardcore side of the One Piece YouTube spectrum, so you're going to hear opinions like this from somebody like me, who, like I also said before, has opinions on this series and isn't just an Oda sycophant. But to further add to Garp's hype moments and aura here, Big Mom fires this big blast at him, which is like a fusion of Prometheus and Zeus, and it just does nothing to him. He's like, this isn't even hot enough to cook a prime rib, Lin, which is cool. Very cool. Big Mom technically shouldn't really be, Yonko level at this point, because she becomes Yonko level in strength like in her 50s and 60s, I guess. I don't know how old she is here. Maybe she's in her 20s or something. But after that, they kind of run away successfully. And what this is going to lead to is, I guess, Garp eventually finding out that the hunting game is going on now, because he's not aware of that. It doesn't seem like most of the cast here is aware of what's going on in God Valley yet. They're all kind of just fighting each other. There's explosions and stuff. I guess the narrative here is that they don't know that innocent civilians are being massacred by psychopaths. So we for sure will come to a point of where everyone realizes what's going on, especially Garp. Because Sengoku said that Garp doesn't want to talk about God Valley because clearly he finds out what had happened, and that I think he said that God Valley, the incident itself, was the reason why Garp stayed as a vice admiral, because he didn't want to directly serve the Celestial Dragons as an admiral. Which, sure, but still, you're still serving them. So even if Garp has some kind of crazy redemption at the end of this arc, it still doesn't matter. And yeah, that's just my opinion. But also, we're getting like a little preview of what might happen in the next chapter, because this one Marine is like giving us the classic Oda map layout of where everything's happening. Usually he winds up doing stuff like this like 3/4 into an arc when all of the chaos is happening and the ticking clock is running. I don't think he's ever done this in a flashback before, but this Marine is showing us where everybody is on the island. The Celestial Dragons are on this side, Rox is coming up through the center, and Roger is coming on the opposite side, where Rox and Roger will eventually converge, or hopefully they will. Also, Rox only has one panel in this chapter, unfortunately. He's looking for his wife and son Blackbeard, and he for sure will find them, and that's going to lead to his death, in my opinion. But hopefully we get to see Rox versus Roger eventually, because that's what's being teased here. So maybe in the next chapter or the next 3 chapters, we'll see Rox versus Roger, or maybe even Rox versus Roger versus Garp. Because we know that Sengoku thinks, at least, that Roger and Garp's teamed up to take down Rox, and that's probably not what happened. Oh, and speaking of Roger, we see one panel of him running into Whitebeard and they clash, and lightning, and then that's it, which is part of the course for Oda at this point in his career, which is fine. Like I said, Toei will pick up the slack, but there's more time spent in this chapter of us seeing how awful Summers is and how he's like abusing Shaki and he's going to kill her. We already know that Summers is awful, and we already know that Shaki is in prison, that everybody's here to save her, but there's more time spent on that to flesh that out. But I can't help but think that, like, don't we want to see Roger fight Whitebeard in an extended fight more than we want to see 3 pages of Shaki getting abused by Summers? Or maybe the casuals don't care about the fights and, legends fighting each other. Maybe they do want to see this loose love story between Shaki and Rayleigh. And I say loose because all it is just they've had a few looks at each other throughout the years, and Shaki was like, I guess you're my type, and then gave him a letter. right? I mean, that's ultimately what it boiled down to. But as Summers is about to kill Shockey because he's crazy, he's a psychopath, he has no empathy or anything, that's why he's going to kill her. There's no other better reason, because I guess he's jealous that Garling's going to get her. I guess that's another reason. Rayleigh comes to save the day, wrecks Summers with one of his named attacks, saves Shockey, and they have like this nice little embrace. And seemingly the Roger Pirates are going to escape at this point. Obviously, it's not going to be that simple. Like I said, we're probably going to see Rox encounter them at some point. So we are in it. We are in the God Valley incident right now. I mean, we've been in God Valley, obviously, but this is the incident part because everything is popping off. Emu is at God Valley right now. They have possessed Saturn, who has been watching the hunting game. And on top of that, Emu has also Dami Reversi, the other Davy clan members that have been at God Valley as well. We're also seeing like this big battle royale between like the Rox Pirates, the Roger Pirates, the God Knights, the Marines, and then just some other Hachinosu pirates as well. Devil fruits are being eaten, cryptic things are being said, and of course, a lot of off-screen battles are happening, and we'll get into that. So first of all, Rayleigh is saving Shockey, they're getting out of there, and the Roger Pirates are staying behind and getting like treasure and stuff. Garp is also finally realizing that the hunting game has been going on. He's seeing all of the dead civilians, and he like immediately radios to Sengoku, and he's like, did you know about this crap? They really did this. And then Sengoku's like, I think I recall someone alluding to it in a vague rambling report once. The guy up and vanished from Navy life sometime afterwards. So the way that he phrases this makes it seem like he's not talking about Dragon, because why wouldn't he just say, oh, your son said that and then he deserted the Marines? Like, this just happened 15 minutes ago. So I don't think he's talking about Dragon. He's talking about somebody else, which is super interesting because that means that this character is very likely either still out there to this day or was somebody that we already know about and is probably some kind of significant character for sure, knowing how Oda crafts his stories. It is very rare that there is throwaway dialogue in this series, which I really appreciate, to be honest. I don't like when, mangas just say things and then it never goes anywhere. One Piece, usually things go somewhere when they are said, especially in the context like this. So who is that character? I have no idea. Could be the man marked by flames. Who knows? I'm sure in 100 chapters we'll find out. But we're coming to Rox, the main character of the story, or at least he really should have been. And he immediately just was able to get his wife Eris along with his son Teach, Blackbeard. And he's running away with them because he's being chased after Garling and the rest of the Davy clan members who were there, who have been transformed into demons via Emu's Dami Reversi magic stuff. The same thing that we see happening to the giants in Elbaf right now currently in the story. Once we come back from this flashback. Also, another interesting thing is that the guy that we saw from the Davy clan, like 1 or 2 chapters ago with the straw hat, that I guess is Rox's dad or grandfather. He calls him Pops. And then the other woman is Granny. So I guess this is like his grandfather and grandmother. Probably. I don't know. Either way, they are, in Rox's immediate family. While he's like running away with Eris, we're getting more info on her. So it turns out that she was a pirate originally, and that the Davy clan, Rox's immediate family, had accepted her, and, they're all cool and everything, and that's why she's been living at God Valley. She's also like begging Rox to just drop her and let her go and, let her escape on her own so that Rox can take care of business on God Valley here because, like we said, Garling and the demonized Davy clan members are after him because she's like, how are you going to fight one-handed? To be honest, Rox, considering what he does in this chapter, probably could defeat them with one hand. But he's worried, of course, because Eris herself is now part of the Davy clan, via being Rox's wife and giving birth to Teach, who is also a full-blooded Davy himself. He's like, look, they're going to torture you to death, essentially, if they find you. She's like, yeah, I know that. If that happens, I'll just take myself out and then kill Teach, which is crazy. But going further, she's like, if I was the kind of woman who just clung onto you and couldn't protect a single child, you wouldn't have fallen for me, right? And then he lets her go, and she's like, it'll be fine. We'll survive this. We're splitting up. Let's meet on Lelusia. We already talked about this. Lelusia is that place that got nuked by Emu after Sabo had escaped the Reverie after finding out about Emu and sitting on the empty throne with the Gorosei transforming and all that stuff. Also, back in one of Ace's cover stories, I think it was like 272 or something like that, we saw that he was chasing after Blackbeard. And one of the places he stopped at was Lelusia because he had heard that Blackbeard had been there. So, yeah, there's a lot of foreshadowing 4D chess
going on here. Long game. I don't know what Lelouch has to do with any of this other than it being nuked, currently in the story, but there's some kind of significance for Lelouch, and Eris is aware of it. Maybe that's where Eris was born. Also, there's like another crazy theory about Eris, and after I've read this chapter, I'm not really too fully convinced on it, but I am going to be making a video on it next week, probably around Monday, Tuesday, in a collab with Sai. So subscribe if you haven't already, guys. I'm going to keep reminding you, we're almost at 300K. Let's just get to 300K, and then we can work to 1 million from there. And I know, haha, Zhoniin, you're an idiot. You're never going to get to 1 million. Yeah, I get it, but we can at least try. Also, if you like the video, it'll push the video out. We can get more people in the comments calling me an idiot, more people for you guys to argue with, more people for you guys to get confirmation bias with, more friends to make, potentially. Not everything has to be pessimistic. It could be a nice place in the comments for all I know. But anyway, Eris could be sus, but I'm not fully convinced on it, but we'll talk more about it next week. Anyway, we're getting to Rox versus Garling in this chapter. And this was kind of the thing that was really hinging on if I was going to give this chapter a 10 out of 10, which 10 out of 10 to me is very sacred. I don't just hand them out willy-nilly. Only, I think, 5 chapters, something like that, maybe even less than that I have reviewed on the channel for the last 7 years have gotten a 10 out of 10. So far, no One Piece chapter has gotten a 10 out of 10 for me. There's been like a 9.5. Like the chapter where Rox invades Mary Joie, takes out the Admiral, and confronts Imu, that's a 9.5 for sure. And if we had seen more stuff actually play out in this chapter, I would have given it a 10 for sure. But unfortunately, Rox versus Garling is off screen not just once, but twice in this chapter, because as he's running from them originally with Eris and Teach on him, we see that he had already initially beaten down Garling, because Garling is like regenerating from the attack that he received. Like his head was like cut in half. And he was like, he sure is strong. It takes a while to regenerate from his sword slashes. And it's like, yeah, of course he's strong. He is, aside from Imu and I guess Harold, like #1 pound for pound in the verse right now. He is an absolute beast in more ways than one. And like Garling is just so pompous and arrogant that he still thinks that he could take him. And he's like, finally ditched your wife and kid, huh? Well, now then, what will the next attack be? And Rox is like, all right, check this out. And just hits him with like his own divine departure. I don't know what he's calling this move. He doesn't even need to call his moves out. That's how awesome Rox is. He doesn't need to name his attacks. He just does them. And that's essentially all we're seeing. He just blows them away. The Dami Reversi Davy clan and Garling just destroyed by this. Also, a really cool, interesting thing that we're seeing in this sequence, other than him just destroying them, is the big hockey sword slash wave thing that he sends. We can see how big it is in relation to like the pillars on God Valley, but the perspective of it I think is very intentional from Oda here, because we're seeing that not quite as big but still pretty big. And I think it goes back to my initial theory on why that pillar is split like that on God Valley, and it's because it was probably somebody from the Void Century that did it. Either Joy Boy, or now that we're seeing Rox do this, it might have been Davy Jones. We're also seeing the moment where Kaido eats his Azure Dragon Devil Fruit, like he steals it from Big Mom, who, stole it from Ivankov. And when he eats it, it is so funny. It's one of Oda's funniest panels probably, because the crap-eating grin that Kaido has on his face is hilarious. And let me just also point out that I know we rag on Kaido and meme on him about how he said, hockey transcends all, Devil Fruits don't matter, Luffy, despite him getting destroyed by the Devil Fruit in the end. But I think it just means that he's learned over time, because this was 38, 40 years ago or whatever. So it's like, yeah, at first when he was a young idiot, he thought, oh, devil fruits are the only thing that matter. I want a devil fruit power. That's going to make me strong. But then as time went on, especially what's going to happen at the end of this chapter, he realizes oh, you need Haki to be God tier in this world. I mean, a devil fruit's nice, especially his, which is one of the best in the series for sure. But Haki, it does transcend all. So he learned a lesson. He was a young idiot, and then he became an old idiot. You're not going to be able to defeat the God Knights or Imu or the Gorosei with a Devil Fruit. You need to have Advanced Conqueror's Haki, or Advanced Conqueror's Haki to defeat them. But we're coming to the end of the chapter here, where, like we talked about in the beginning, Imu has possessed Saturn. And what led to that sequence was Imu, talking to Saturn, through telepathy or whatever, because, the Gorosei, they can all do that. Obviously, this is a power that Imu has given them, I suppose. And Emu's asking Saturn, like, is Rox dead? And Saturn's like, no, it kind of, things got out of hand here. All of the crazy chaos that's happening on this island, if it continues, risks something else being unleashed. What is that? Again, I don't know. It sounds exciting. What is going to be unleashed? Is it something at God Valley specifically? Is it Uranus? Does Uranus have a mind of its own? Probably not. Is there like some kind of creature, or I just don't know. I'm not smart enough to know what this is. Are we supposed to know? I mean, whenever I say that, it seems like someone on Reddit or some Japanese YouTuber has already figured this out 2 years ago. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments. What are they talking about here? Is this just going over my head? Is it something obvious? Am I thinking too much into it? What is going to be unleashed? Because Emu's like, that must not be permitted. What is it? And considering that Emu is doing that, it probably has something to do with Joy Boy, I guess. Because that is the thing that Emu fears the most. Joy Boy and Nika. They are terrified of that. So I guess it has something to do with that. As Emu takes over Saturn, everyone is immediately aware of it. And when I say everyone, I mean like the important people. Like Roger, Garp, they're aware that something is happening here. I mean, they're not immediately aware like, oh, this is Emu. They are the secret leader of the world government. And they're the cause of the oppression of the world. Like, they're not obviously aware of that immediately, but they know like, holy crap, this is something we have never felt before. And speaking of that, Rox is like staring down Emu at this point, and Whitebeard is right there with him. And Rox is like, there's not much to gain here, you know? You still gonna help? And Whitebeard's like, don't sweat it. I owe you since I'm always drinking on your tab. Like, oh man, one of the best moments in the series so far. Oh, I love this moment so much. And then Kaido joins in too, because he just got his devil fruit, so he's like on a dopamine high from just having this overpowered dragon form. He's like, hey guys, check this out, I'm here too. Rox is like, well, at least someone's having a fun time. So the three of them are staring down Emu right now, essentially an unwinnable fight. And it seems like Roger and Garp are going to enter into this too, because Sengoku said that Roger and Garp teamed up to defeat Rox. Again, we don't know if that is propaganda, misinformation, or whatever, but wow. So coming into the beginning of this chapter, we're seeing Emu, who has taken over Saturn at God Valley, and they're killing Marines that are like in front of them just simply because they're in their way. They're killing pirates too, but it just shows that like, yeah, Emu doesn't care about the Marines, which is understandable because they're not celestial dragons. And that's also a really interesting thing. It's like, I guess loyalty is like a big thing to Emu that they actually care about, because they do care for the celestial dragons, which are descendants of the 20 kingdoms that allied with Emu back in the Void Century. And we have seen celestial dragons be executed before, such as like Mjosgard by Garling, but that's because Mjosgard kind of like betrayed the celestial dragons, I guess, by like helping fishmen or whatever. But still, there is some kind of altruism to Emu in a weird way. I'm also going to talk about this next break week with Sai, about how Emu might be like the weird kind of protector of the world. But aside from that, we're seeing how Emu looks here. We're getting like a clear image of them. Well, not what they actually look like. They still look like a black blob. And that makes you wonder, like, is this what Emu actually looks like? Or is it just classic Oda silhouette core still going on for, I think like 6 years now or something, maybe even 7. It probably has something to do with their devil fruit, why they look like this on top of Saturn, you know, the manipulation form or whatever. But I'm sure there is like a real like human form to what Emu looks like. We're also seeing Roger and Garp react to this, because Roger, talking to the rest of the Roger pirates, is like, hey, you know, get the treasure and then get out of here. And he implies that he's going to stay behind and fight Emu. And Scopper's like, you and this again? Don't overdo it, all right? And it implies that Roger kind of knows what's going on here, because he could easily just leave right now with the treasure, but he's choosing to stay here because he knows things. Even before going to Laugh Tale, he seems to have insight into what's going on with Emu possibly, or just the world government in general. This flashback is more about Rox than anything, so I guess we're just gonna have to wait for another Roger flashback if we get that, where we find out everything that he knows, because there is a reason why he's doing everything that he does and eventually goes to Laugh Tale, so he definitely knows some stuff. We just don't know
what he knows yet. And as for Garp, I'm gonna say it, I really like the way that he behaves in this chapter, because he's like, what's going on? What kind of monster is that? And the Marine that he's talking to is like, he just transformed out of nowhere. And Garp's like, it's the first time I've seen an elder, but that's exactly how I pictured those B words. And even him just saying that is like making the other Marine shook. So this confirms for sure that Garp knows that this is a Gorosei, who is said to, the rest of the world to be the highest authority of the world government. And we'll come back to Garp because he has some other great moments, and I'll talk more about how he's possibly redeemed and all that stuff. But we're seeing Rox now confront Emu, and he's like, hey, King of Rats, she came here to kill me, right? And Emu's like, so it was you, Davy Jones. And Rox is like, nah, that's not me. I never met the guy. But I am going to keep that promise, with promise in bold and quotes. And Emu's like, it's for that very promise that I shall blot you from the pages of history, because my world isn't completed yet. So, Emu calling Rox Davy Jones here is kind of just equating him to Davy Jones, because he's like the Rox of the Void Century from like 800, 900 years ago. And Emu existed during that time, so for sure, Emu probably fought against Davy Jones along with Joy Boy at that time as well. And Davy Jones was probably trying to take down Emu the same way that Rox was. We know that Rox has inherited Davy Jones's will the same way that Luffy has inherited Joy Boy's will. The will of D, because Davy was Davy D. Jones. And as for Emu saying their world isn't completed yet, well, I guess there's just some more construction and things that need to be done to complete it. Because the way that the One Piece world is, like with the Red Line, the Grand Line, the tides, the high elevation of water, the way that the islands are, it wasn't originally like that. Emu, during the Void Century, after they won the big war against the Ancient Kingdom, they constructed it to be this way. And that's why there is like that void in time, like that 100-year gap, because it took 100 years to build the world with the Red Line and the Grand Line and all that stuff. Also, that's not confirmed, by the way. It's never said anywhere that this is why things are the way that they are and it happened during that time. It's just, we can kind of put two and two together and assume that's how things happen. But Rox winds up attacking Emu, and Garp and the Marines are watching this, and they're like, wow, he's attacking Saint Saturn. Should we help him, Garp? Referring to should we help Saturn? Because why would the Marines try to help Rox, a friggin' pirate? And Garp's like, of course we should help him. Get out of my way. And they're like, wait, who are we supposed to help? And Garp does go on to attack Emu/Saturn, which we'll talk about. And I love it. I love that Garp is doing this. He clearly knows what's going on here, but seeing that Emu was attacking the Marines, just killing them nonchalantly, made Garp instantly realize, like, okay, I know it has to be done here. Now, let's get into the elephant in the room here. Does this redeem Garp? Both yes and no. There has to be some kind of meaningful explanation as to, first of all, why Emu and Saturn allow Garp to remain not only alive after this, but also a Marine. I mean, just aside from him attacking them, it's him just being a D in the first place. Even though the Ds don't know what D means, what Emu said to Cobra back at the Reverie, it just doesn't make sense. And also why Garp stays a Marine after this. So some explanations are, Emu does something that wipes Garp's mind. That's a possibility. Number 2, Saturn and Emu make a deal with Garp or something. And number 3, Garp sees that it's better to stay as a Marine and try to overthrow them from the inside out, the world government. Because, in my opinion, I think Garp started Sword. And Sword is supposed to be like the real Marines, like the true justice that aren't necessarily operating with the world government and their totalitarian regime, more so kind of just trying to be a real altruistic police force in the world. And his ultimate goal is to one day maybe they'll overthrow them and they don't have to worry about the world government and the celestial dragons and all that stuff. That's fine. But at the same time, for the last 40 years, because this has been a slow burn plan from Garp, if that is the case, he has still been facilitating the celestial dragons, the world government, and all of the awful things that they do. He even went out of his way to help with the execution of Ace, who is essentially his freaking son. So that's why I just fully can't get on board with Garp, especially when we see what his son Dragon immediately does after he just finds out what went on with the hunting games. Dragon doesn't even know about Emu at this point. I mean, maybe he will soon. But also let me point out, a lot of this agenda stuff is just fun, right? It's fun to pick a side. It's fun to be tribal. Even though I inherently as a person is not very tribal, which I guess more so goes into my tragic backstory, which we won't get into now, but this community that we have, not just the community on this channel, but just the spoiler community as a whole, we experience One Piece in a very different way than the rest of the community. You know, there's that bigger part of the community that just follows when the chapter drops, you know, from the scans or whatever. And then there's a portion that just follows the officials. And then there's a portion that just watches YouTube videos to see what happened every now and then. And then, of course, there's the majority of the fandom that just watches the anime episodes. But we, in the spoiler community, find out things incrementally. So we can have multiple reactions to things as we find them out. So one day we can be like, oh, this character's awful. And then the next day we'd be like, oh, maybe they're not so bad. And then the next day we'd be like, oh my God, this is the greatest character ever. It's part of the fun, to be honest. It's not like I'm trying to die on my sword or ride or die about this stuff. And I know I do get emotional in some of these reviews, just as some other creators do as well, but it's just a part of the fun. And that's why I'm doing this, because it is fun. I don't really have to like do this anymore. I choose to do it because I like doing it, and I want to see One Piece ride out. I want to be here until the end of One Piece, you know, however long that takes. Hopefully I don't retire before then, but you know, I plan on at least finishing One Piece as Zhoniin. But ultimately what I'm saying is that I'm open to changing, for sure. I'm not staunch in my beliefs. I'm not going to go out on my shield just because my ego is taking over, or I don't want to be seen as wrong or whatever. If you followed my channel, you know that I'm wrong all the time, and I'm very happy to admit that. I'm also right a lot too, and I try not to harp too much on it, although it is fun to like say like, hey, I was right, because, you know, I have like thousands of people telling me that I'm wrong, which is just, you know, part of being a creator. It's kind of like the market. It goes up and down. Sometimes you guys like me, sometimes you guys despise me, and sometimes you guys just feel indifferent about me. It's just a part of the game. And I'm not saying like feel bad about me or I'm a victim or anything, because I'm not. I chose to do this, and I continue to. Garp isn't like a real person, although that's a part of the fun as well, making these characters in this story seem like it's real, because following it the way that we do, especially the way that I do, it's almost like sports. And I guess that's always kind of been my thing as Zhoniin since the beginning, because I come from sports. Not like the mainstream sports, like football and basketball and baseball and all that stuff. I'm more so a big fan of the alternative sports. So I just wanted to give you some insight into why I am the way that I am, and why I see things the way that I do, and why I project myself and kind of live vicariously through these characters. Because if they don't do something that I personally agree with, I'll air my grievances towards it. But ultimately, it's just for fun, and for the content, and for us to just look forward to something to do every week. You know, we're following this the way that you would sports or something. And it's okay to be angry at me and not agree with what I'm saying. It's just a part of the game. So let's just keep playing it, because I'm not really gonna change. I mean, I will try to evolve, but I still will be hyperbolic about things, especially if we just get the first glimpse of information on it before everything's fully fleshed out, because it's what I want to do. Anyway, tangent over. We're also seeing that Captain John has Kid's devil fruit, which is interesting. I mean, it's more so, I guess, supposed to parallel to something, maybe what Kid ultimately does later on in the series, but he uses it to like attract all of the treasure to him. And this angers Gonzoi, who we find out has Mr. Five's bomb fruit, and he like launches a booger at him and just straight up defeats Captain John with one booger. So I guess that means that Captain John's not really that powerful in relation to the rest of the Rocks pirates. It also made me think that like the users of the bomb fruit, man, they could really take advantage of it if they threw like a turd at somebody, you know? Instead of just wasting your time on these boogers, just, you know, store up some turds and just boom, you know what I mean? We're also seeing Dragon, who's holding Baby Shanks at this point, gets like hurled in this sequence, and it eventually leads to like him letting go of Baby Shanks, and Baby Shanks himself just crawls into a treasure chest, and then that's eventually going to lead to the Roger Pirates finding him and then raising him. Then we're coming to Big Mom trying to get her revenge on Kaido, because Kaido took the Azure dragon fruit from her, which she was going to give to her son Katakuri, and he just immediately ate it, and we see like this is the first moments of him being the dragon. So now she's coming back after him, you know, super angry, and at the same time we see Rocks, Whitebeard, Roger, and Garp all attacking Emu. So Big Mom is indirectly
attacking Emu as well, trying to get at Kaido, and vice versa with Kaido, attacking her. And it all winds up with them attacking Emu at the same time in this incredible sequence. And this double page is so cool. This is the first time I think we've ever seen 5 characters on this level attack somebody at the same time, because we've never been this high on the power scale before. This is essentially all of the strongest characters in the world at this point in time, all attacking at once against Emu, the one above all, essentially. And they're all using named attacks. Even Rocks, which his attack is called Pandemonium. I think this is the first named attack that we're seeing from him. And of course, this really doesn't do anything to Emu. It doesn't even phase them, to be honest. They kind of just immediately go into trying to manipulate Rocks after this, but it's just because of the regeneration powers that they have, which is like seemingly Majin Buu level at this point. We still don't know why Emu could do this. We don't know what power Emu has. It's implied that they were able to harness the power of like this demon dragon that existed maybe 3,000 years ago or something. Again, just hypothesizing. We hardly really know anything. We're kind of just going off of the Harley text and the mural on the Atom Tree at Elbaf. But Emu comes back together after this and starts manipulating Rocks, saying like, hey, I could see your wife and kid running through the forest. It would suck if something happened to them. And then, this angers Rocks and he goes after Emu again, and Emu just stabs him with their tendrils or whatever. And Rocks just no-sells this, which is awesome. But Emu's like, hey, just kill your wife and kids. And Rocks is like, what? Why would I do that? Of course I'm not going to do that. And Emu's like, well, how about Dami Reversi? I would be more shocked about this, but we've been talking about it literally all week. We knew that this was going to happen. However, it didn't happen the way that I thought. We're kind of just seeing Rocks begin to become the demon at the end of this chapter, which I'm hoping means that Rocks like brute forces through this. Like he can unreversi or Dami Versi. You know what I mean? Because if anybody could do that, it would definitely be Rocks. And I'm hoping he could just get out of this, because that would be incredible. And he just winds up dying traditionally. Because unfortunately, Rocks is going to die here. We are already kind of seeing the beginning of it with Emu stabbing him. Not really sure. I just hope that he just doesn't become a subservient demon to Emu and then tries to even kill Eris and Teach. That would just, like I said before, almost be like a character assassination, to be honest. Like Oda spent all this time making Rocks essentially the best character in the series, only for him to just go out like such a chump, So I'm hoping he can fight through this. Maybe it has something to do with his Davy D blood. And also, I just want to point out one more thing about the Dami Reversi. So it's like this thing that Emu could just do to you and make you into a subservient demon. And there was this theory going around earlier this week that in order to make this ability not so broken, it seems like the prerequisite for it is that you need to perform it on somebody while they're in their homeland. Because before this, we've only seen Emu do it to the giants at Elbaf, which, where they come from, and then the Davy clan at God Valley, which is where they come from, along with Rocks. So if that is the balancing act to that, that makes it somewhat better. It's still an incredibly broken ability, but at least it's not just like Emu could just do it to anyone, because that's what I've been talking about these last couple days, I guess weeks at this point. So I think it is that you have to do it on somebody in their homeland. And then also that raises the question of like, why does it work that way? Again, we don't know. We're just gonna have to wait for the Void Century flashback in like 6 years, I guess, once it's revealed like how Emu got their power, where it came from, because I think it's also not even a devil fruit, to be honest. I think this is probably something outside of devil fruits. It's even possible that Emu got this power before devil fruits were even a thing. Like somehow just directly pulled the power from that demon dragon itself without having to go through a devil fruit. I could be wrong. It could have just been the first devil fruit, like it was that demon dragon made into that, because I guess it's supposed to parallel to like how Joy Boy got the Nika fruit. Like Nika is implied to be like originally a person or a deity, maybe like a real deity, and then he died, I guess, against Emu or whatever, and then his soul or the idea of what he was eventually became the devil fruit, mythical Zoan modeled sun god Nika. And that could be the same thing with Emu. I don't really know, because it's just that Emu has so many freaking abilities that it's just like, I guess maybe it is the strongest devil fruit, because mythical Zoans already have multiple abilities. That's the way that Oda kind of like skirted around his own power system. So in the previous chapter, we saw Rocks, Roger, Garp, Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom all attacking Emu at once, and it did nothing. Emu has like crazy regeneration powers and technically isn't even there. They're like possessing Saturn. And this led to Emu like stabbing rocks with their tendrils and manipulating them into Dami Reversi. And coming into this chapter, we're seeing that Rox is like fighting back against it. He is somewhat stopping the Dami Reversing, but only for so long, unfortunately, and we'll get into that. But he says something really interesting to Emu in the opening sequence here. He says, Davy D. Jones, that was the name of the previous king of the world. And Emu says, insolent fool, that wretch was never king. Not for a single moment thou hast no place in the fate that binds Mu and Davy. And Rox says, you been afraid for a long time, haven't ya? Afraid that one day someone's gonna inherit Davy's will and fulfill the promise. And when he says that, we see a panel of Eris and Teach, obviously alluding to the fact that Teach, aka Blackbeard, is going to inherit that will and fulfill the promise. Now, what is this promise? I don't know. Who knows? I mean, Luna PNR or Dawn and Dusk, they probably know. Clearly it relates to the Void Century. Something happened back then that led to a promise being made that gave birth to the D's and the Will of D, which led to this big crazy war between the D's, or I guess just the Great Kingdom and the allies of the D's, against Emu and the 20 kingdoms that'll eventually become the Celestial Dragons. And there was crazy devil fruit stuff going on, and one way or another, there was some promises that were made, poneglyphs were made, ancient weapons may or may not have been made, and Emu eventually won. Somehow. And also, let me give an updated take, or maybe even a correction, on the previous spoilers video. So, the initial spoilers that we got from this chapter on what Rox says in this sequence about, you afraid someone's gonna inherit Davy's will and fulfill the promise? It made it seem like that's what the Will of D was, and it still could be, but I don't think the Will of D literally means like Will of Davy. And I don't think that means that D, you know, the initial, means Davy, because, you know, Davy D. Jones. His name is Davy Jones. D probably means Dawn. We can go back to buying that stock. You can pump that coin before it gets rug pulled in about 6 years when we find out that D probably means something else, and it might even be anticlimactic. But ultimately, Davy's will, the promise, or the Will of D, or the D's, I guess essentially just means overthrowing what Emu has done and then returning the world to one piece. Maybe. I don't know. Hey, also guys, real quick, let's try to get this video to 2,000 likes. All you gotta do is grab the phone, hit your thumb right there, and you'll be helping me out a lot. You don't even have to subscribe anymore. I just need some likes on the video. Thank you. But going further, Rox is like, I wonder who scares you most? Davy D. Jones? Joy Boy? And Emu's like, cease this babble. They shall never resurface, so long as thou fades into oblivion. And it's like, Emu, why don't you just kill all the D's? Why do you have D's in the military? Why do you like still have the gum fruit in circulation? And also Joy Boy. That's like an audible silhouette for Oda here, because I'm assuming Joy Boy like isn't his name. Like, is his name Joy Boy? I mean, we know Davy D. Jones' name, so like what's Joy Boy's name? And I guess that's just a later reveal for Oda, which is fine. I know we kind of rag on these silhouettes and these long drawn out reveals, but to be honest, I like it. We don't have to rush to that stuff. I like having like these big crazy reveals every couple years or whatever, because it is fun, but at the same time, you know, it's a little annoying. We can feel both things about this. It's okay. But Emu winds up threatening to Rox that they're going to essentially take over Elbaf and use them as soldiers to rule the world or whatever. And that Harold himself is going to be a big pawn in that, because they say like, a sovereign this pliable may never appear again. And this angers Rox further because, you know, Rox loves Harold. And he's like, stay away from Harold, he just wants peace. And I guess this further alludes to the fact that Emu does in fact Dami Reversi Harold, because at the beginning of this flashback, which was 14 years from the current time in the story, we see the moment where Harold is killed, or at least the beginning of his death, because his own guards are like stabbing him. And this eventually leads to like Loki killing him, or at least implied that Loki kills him. And when we saw the silhouette, we were like, oh, he looks like he's Dami Reversi. And given what happens later on in this chapter, it's very likely that Harold tells Loki to kill him. And that's probably how this flashback is going to end, I guess, because once God Valley ends, I don't think we're just going to come straight back into like the current time in Elbaf. We still have to finish like the initial flashback with what happened to King Harold. Or at least I'm assuming that's what Oda is going to do. Because it would just be odd if he doesn't. But I don't know, knowing Oda, he might just do that. We'll see. But Imu winds up slamming rocks into the ground, and this is enough to just fully Dami Reversi him, I guess. And he winds up attacking Kaido and Big Mom, and he even attacks Whitebeard. And this attack winds up breaking one of the huge pillars on God Valley, and it just comes crashing down. And this made me remember that God Valley is said to not exist anymore. So whatever happens in the next chapter or two, God Valley is essentially going to be destroyed, either through Uranus or what Imu does, or between the battle of Rocks, Roger, and Garp, possibly. Maybe not completely vaporized, because I still think the theory that Thriller Bark is a part of God Valley is still pretty valid. Then we get to the real part of this chapter that kind of sucks, and it's Rocks straight up chasing down Eris and Teach, and he's about to kill them because, you know, that's what Imu wants. He doesn't wind up killing them because Kuma uses his paw teleportation on them. So we don't know where Kuma sent them. He can only send them someplace that he has been before, and considering that he's so young, I guess the possibilities are limited. I mean, he was born in the Sorbet Kingdom, I guess, so he could send them there. I mean, there's also a possibility that he's been to the Drum Kingdom before, because Blackbeard has some kind of connection to the Drum Kingdom. He, like, rampaged through there initially. That's actually the first time that we find out about Blackbeard, interestingly enough. We also know that Eris wanted to go to Lelusia for some reason. So I don't know if he could send them there. I don't know if he's been there. But Eris and Teach wind up surviving. I mean, we knew Teach was going to survive, but Eris surviving is pretty cool. I didn't want to see her die. And there's another interesting theory about her that I saw going around, and it's that the person on the Denden Mushi that's talking to Loki, whose name is Shaggy in the Viz, or Mosha or Mosaka or whatever in other translations, that could be Eris somehow communicating with him. And maybe that's how Loki knows so much about rocks, because technically this flashback is being narrated to Luffy by Loki. That's just you know, it's just a theory. We don't really know who Shaggy or Moshika is at this point, but it would be pretty cool if it was Eris. Then we come to the end of the chapter, and Garp and Roger are like sticking around. They're like, bring it on, rocks! And they're like staring down each other. They realize that something has happened to him, clearly. And then Rocks suddenly starts using what is implied to be the voice of all things. And he says, Roger, Garp, please, kill me! So that's pretty cool. I mean, using the voice of all things. I mean, we weren't really sure about it in the spoilers earlier in this week, but in these panels, it's very clear that this is the voice of all things. Like, when you see a character go like this means the voice of all things is being used. And I guess we're going to get into that further on in the series. I guess it's just that advanced Conquerors hockey, or advanced observation hockey, or whatever. You can use the voice of all things, where you can just talk to anyone telepathically, even like animals. And then we see in the final page that the battle's about to start, and it says the climax of God Valley. So it seems like what Sengoku told us 6-7 years ago, 6-7, like the video, is actually coming to fruition. Roger and Garp are gonna kill Rocks, which is fine. I mean, I at least like that Rocks is cogent enough to be able to say, hey, kill me, with the voice of all things. But I still don't like the Dami Reversi stuff. It just puts a bad taste in your mouth, you know? And you don't have to agree with me on that. That's fine. If you love Dami Reversi, if you love Imu, if you love what's going on with Rocks, that's fine. So we're seeing Garp and Roger teaming up to take on Dami Reversi'd Rocks in this chapter, and it's pretty intense. However, we're not seeing as much as I expected, but I am appreciative that we're seeing as much as we are. So in the previous chapter, we saw Rocks essentially using like the voice of all things to tell Roger and Garp, like, hey, can you guys just kill me? Because that's essentially like the only way he can really communicate to them at this point. You know, as he's Dami Reversi'd by Imu, he becomes like a subservient demon to them. But I guess through his like sheer willpower, he can like voice of all things to them what he truly wants, despite being forced to fight against them regardless. And they're slowly trying to figure out what's going on here. I mean, even though it's pretty obvious that Rocks has been like transformed here, I mean, it's better than what the Rocks pirates do in response to this, but we'll get to that. So as they're taking him on together, they're hitting him with Conquerors hockey. Like, they straight up say in this chapter that they're actually using Conquerors hockey, which is is nice because Oda doesn't really specify that too much. But Rox is still able to fight back against them because while Rox in his base is really strong, probably stronger than both Garp and Roger individually, but considering that he's been buffed by the Dami Reversi, they for sure need to team up to take him down. And while this is happening, all the other crews and the Marines, essentially everyone that's there is just like piecing out of this island now because of all the chaos that's going on. And Roger and Garp are staying behind because they feel almost obligated to, but the Rox pirates, they're just done, which is a shame. I mean, we knew it was going to happen, but just the way that they react to this, it's like they don't care, which is understandable because inherently they were always not like the most moral crew or like most loyal, I guess, but they were a team. They all respected each other to an extent, especially Rox. But as soon as he got Dami Reversi'd and attacked Big Mom Kaido and Whitebeard, they're just done. Big Mom and Kaido, understandable, but Whitebeard, he just chooses to leave after seeing that. He doesn't even like give it a second thought, doesn't even stay behind to see what's going on. He's just like, no, I'm leaving. And he randomly runs into Marco's dad. Now, it's not confirmed that this is Marco's dad, but come on, it's clearly freaking Marco's dad. His name is Polo Graham. We talked about this before. Marco Polo, that's the joke. I don't know why he's there. Like, he's the captain of his own crew. I guess he heard about the God Valley Shakuyaku stuff and he just showed up. Maybe he was one of the crews on Hachinosu inherently. I don't know. But he's like, hey, Whitebeard, I'm a fan of yours. You need a ship to get on? And Whitebeard's like, buzz off, don't get in my way. And then that's pretty much where that sequence ends. So I guess you just assume that he eventually does get on that ship and maybe like takes over the crew or something, or somehow he winds up with Polo's son Marco because, you know, Marco becomes one of the most iconic Whitebeard pirates. So that's how that happened. Emu, who is possessing Saturn, is also leaving God Valley for some reason. I don't know why they just didn't stay behind and like kill Roger and Rox at the same time, but I guess they felt that it would just be better to Dami Reversi Rox and then just have him do the dirty work. Also, Dami Reversing Rox is probably like foreshadowing or reverse foreshadowing as to what happened in the past with Davy Jones possibly. We're going to be talking about this next week because we're going to have a break week next week. So I'm going to be collabing with Sai and also another special secret guest, which you guys will find out on Wednesday. And also, guys, can we get 2,000 likes on this video? All you got to do is just grab your phone, hit the like button. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. And Emu says that island never existed. Is that clear? And I thought at first that meant that they were going to like blow up God Valley because then Goku said, yeah, God Valley doesn't exist on a map anymore. And I thought it's because they blow it up with Uranus or whatever, you know, the way that they did to Lelusia. But more exposition that we're getting here tells us that the records kept by G11 and CP6, which are like the CIA kind of the world government, concerning the top secret level S special mission on God Valley are sparse. Everything was purged. The records of the incident were purged. So either just the records of it were removed and everybody forgot where this place is located, or it does get Uranus. And I guess we'll get more into that at the end of this chapter because the ending of it is kind of ambiguous. And also, one more thing before we get back into the Rox versus Garp and Roger. We see young Dragon here going completely crazy on his own crew, like pulling a gun on them, saying like, hey, bring these survivors aboard, you know, the remaining survivors of God Valley. And he's like, and if anybody's got a problem with that, I'll execute them. Like, he's going crazy here, which is understandable because he's just been trying to save people since he found out what was going on with the hunting game. And he originally had baby Shanks, but he thought that he had lost him in the previous chapter. But then he was like, oh, I couldn't even save one baby. So now he's like, you know what? I'm saving somebody, all right? I'm not leaving unless I'm saving somebody, even if I have to kill my own freaking crew. So I love it. Love young Dragon. Not so much a fan of older Dragon, but maybe he'll start acting more now when we come back to, you know, the current time in the story, now that he's actually kind of been fleshed out. But anyway, we're coming back to Roger and Garp taking on Rox. Roger says to Garp, like, hey, if you want to leave the Navy, you should join us. And Garp's like, heck no. If I quit, who'd protect the Marines? So I guess that's it. That's all we're going to get on why Garp stays with the Marines despite knowing what's happening with the world government and the hunting game and everything. Roger at least understands that, like, hey, you just found out that the world government are all psychopaths. They have this hunting game. You just saw that one of the elders, I mean, they don't know Emu necessarily, but they know that, hey, one of the Gorosei, he's like this big evil spider demon monster who's killing civilians and Marines. So he's like, yeah, it will make sense if you want to leave. And Garp's like, no, who would protect the Marines? So that's it. That's why Garp
Garp is staying because he feels that he needs to protect the Marines, which is fine. I get it. Like I said, he probably has started Sword as a way to, I don't know, overthrow the world government one day and become like the real Marines, the real paragons of justice or whatever. But it just goes back to my old argument. Him staying with them is still facilitating the Celestial Dragons and their debauchery. So it is what it is. But at least he thinks that he's noble, so that's better than nothing. And they start talking about the hockey dynamic here, which I appreciate because, like I said, this isn't really discussed too much with Oda. So Roger's like, it's all about mass, Garp. Armament hockey could normally counter Devil Fruit abilities, and I'm using Conqueror's hockey coding to boot. So there's no way my attacks aren't doing anything. And Garp is like, well, it's because he's also using Conqueror's hockey to guard himself. It's not a surprise that we cancel each other out. So that's cool. Now we know for sure what's going on here. Everyone's using Conqueror's hockey, but Rock's coding himself in it is negating theirs as well, and canceling it out. But then they ultimately come to the conclusion that, like, hey, we're not going to win a war of attrition against this guy. He's just too much of a beast. We're going to have to hit him with one big attack where we both use all of our Conqueror's hockey together in one last gambit. And then it's going to drain us completely afterwards, but this has to work. But anyway, we come to the ending sequence here, and Roger's getting emotional, knowing what he's going to have to do with Rox here, because he knows that Rox is like Dami reversing. I mean, he doesn't literally know that, but he knows that this isn't like Rox willingly want to do all this stuff. He is being manipulated here. And he's tearing up. He's like, I don't know what's happened to you, but I do know one thing. I can feel your frustration. And like Rox is crying too. And this is cool. I like that Roger feels this way towards Rox, but it's just unfortunate because we didn't really get too much interaction between them. We didn't have like a lot of build up with them to make this moment feel even more emotional. I mean, once it comes to the anime, the casuals, they'll love it. But if you've been reading the manga the way that we have on a weekly basis for the last couple months, it's like they only really interacted like once, maybe twice. The most that they had was back in chapter 1158 when they met up at Shaki's bar. That was pretty much it. And they just had like that heated rivalry moment. That I mean, they knew of each other, and I guess it's implied off panel that they had a bunch of interactions, but we just never saw it. We just didn't have enough time with these characters, unfortunately. Even though this flashback was very long, at the same time, it wasn't enough. But they wind up hitting Rox with their combined ultimate all Conqueror's hockey expelled attack. Roger's Hinon Kagutsuchi Ace and Garp's Infinitum Explosion. And this blows Rox apart, like bypasses Emu's regeneration, and he's just in pieces at this point, and he's seemingly killed by this. It's hard to really make out, but it seems like he's not coming back from this. We don't get confirmation that he is dead here, but it says that the disbanding of the chaotic crew led by Rox D. Xebec leave an undeniable echo and would continue to shake the world. A legendary incident uncovered. And that's like where the chapter ends. And I'm hoping that this doesn't mean that this is the end of the God Valley flashback, because we need at least one more chapter here, right? Can we just see Rox dying to know that he is dead and that there's no other shenanigans going on with what had happened to him? Also, can we see if Uranus does blow up God Valley? Or does Oda just think that this is good enough and we don't need to see anything else? Because if God Valley is over, we should be coming back to, what was it, 17 or 14 years ago from the current time, where we see King Harold's death. And that's probably going to turn out that he was Dami reversing as well, and he may be voice of all things to Loki, telling him to kill him. But I guess we'll see. I do have a feeling that this is the end of God Valley, and if it is, you know, it's not terrible, but it's just felt rushed despite being long. You know what I mean? All right, a lot to talk about in this chapter, but first I just want to talk about Rox's official color scheme being revealed, and we're seeing it on the cover of the new Shonen Jump magazine that's coming out this Sunday. And that being said, I can't show an image of it because it hasn't been officially released yet, but I'm sure a lot of you watching this have already seen it, and if you haven't already, if you know where to look, you can easily just find it. But this is what the official color scheme is. Rox has like purplish bluish streaks and white overall hair. He has like red eyes, and his scars, question mark, whatever these are, because they're like purple. So I don't know if they're scars. I guess they are, but I don't know, they're purple. And then it's hard to see it, but like his feather boa, is that what you call it? You know, the thing that Hulk Hogan used to have, that looks like it's gonna be black. And this is fine. So given that Rox looks like this, and given that it seems like Eris doesn't have black hair either, it's like, how does Blackbeard look the way that he does? It is what it is. But anyway, speaking of Rox, we're seeing the last moments of his
his life in the beginning of this chapter. And it's actually way more significant than I thought it was going to be, because going off of the spoilers, it made it seem like it was very cut and dry. And also let me mention that we're going to be going over a lot more in this video than what we were able to go over in the spoilers that we got earlier in this week. But Rox is laying there after he was defeated by Roger and Garp, and he says, "Is it lifted? The curse? I'm alive. I need to get off this." And then he's interrupted by the Holy Knights walking up, which we'll get into. But Rox is fine here. He says the curse has been lifted, meaning that he is no longer Dami Reversied, and we see, that he is not. So that's reassuring. It means that Dami Reversied can essentially be beaten out of you, I guess. If somebody hits you with enough mass, or I guess enough Conqueror's Haki with some soul power in it or whatever. It's ambiguous at this point as to what mass exactly means, but it has something to do with Conqueror's Haki, I guess. I mean, Haki just overcomes everything in the end. That's like what Oda's solution is to all of the antagonistic powers so far. And it seems like Rox was going to just live. Like, he was going to survive this, which is wild, and it just makes this even more bittersweet. Because, like we see here, the Holy Knights are walking up. It's Garling, Summers, and Maffey. And Rox realizes that, yep, I'm pretty much screwed at this point. But Roger and Garp, you guys get out of here. You guys are the ones that should live instead of me. I mean, he doesn't say that literally, but it's like, this is not something that you should die for. But Garling winds up coming up to Rox and just stabs him with his sword. And as Rox dies, he says, "Thank you for stopping my rampage," which that was his last request to them. It was like, "Hey guys, kill me. I'm freaking Dami Reversied here. I almost killed my wife and child. You're the only ones that are going to be able to take me out here," because Garling is a freaking bum. Garling got low diff by Rox. So of course this sniveling coward is going to come up and kill him after the fact when he's defenseless. But we're supposed to hate Garling. I get it. Hey, also guys, can we try to get 2,000 likes on this video? I know you're probably watching this on your phone. Just hit that like button right there. It'll help me out. It'll help the video. And I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. And also, it's like, I really hope Garling is way stronger now currently in the story, but given that he is a Gorosei, he's probably not, because the Gorosei are kind of like not that strong, surprisingly. I mean, they're strong for sure, don't get me wrong, but they don't seem as strong as you would think they are. And also, Rox dying here, he doesn't have like the D smile on his face, which I for sure thought he was going to. Given that there are two branches of the Ds, I mean, at least it seems that way, with the Davy Ds and the Joy Boy Ds. Maybe the Joy Boy Ds die with smiles and then the Davy Ds don't, maybe? I don't know. But Scopper and Rayleigh wind up saving Roger and Garp here. And Garp and Roger are like, "Where's Rox?" As they're being carried away. They're like, what's going on with him? What happened to him? And they tell them that he was killed. And it's like Garp and Roger cared more about Rox in the end than the Rox freaking pirates did. And man, that just kind of upsets me. I don't expect Kaido and Big Mom to care because they're freaking psychopaths, but like Whitebeard, he didn't even care. He just ghosted him and left. I mean, I know that he was attacked by Rox, but you have to realize that he was like not Rox. He grew twice in size and had horns and fangs and clearly wasn't acting right. And there was like a big crazy spider monster there. It's like, you gotta put two and two together here, Whitebeard. And like I also talked about before, if Whitebeard is just too stupid to realize what had happened here, then I at least hope Roger cleared it up to him eventually, because they're going to meet and speak many times over the next 20 years after this. But anyway, God Valley winds up sinking into the ground because of all the destruction, everything that had happened to it. And everyone that was there is able to get off of the island on various ships. And the narrator says, like a stage curtain coming down, the island crumbled and was swallowed by thick fog. This is a summary of the little-known God Valley incident. However, after a brief moment of silence, countless branches and enormous bolts of lightning split the heavens. I think this might be Uranus coming out of the clouds. I mean, I'm just taking a guess here, but don't you just think it's really interesting the way that the narrator says this? It says, however, after a brief moment of silence, countless branching and enormous bolts of lightning split the heavens. So it's happening after the fact, like the ships are already leaving. So I guess that means that this is Uranus, possibly? Because we were speculating about that before. Because the way that Emu was talking after they were leaving the island was the same way they were talking when they want Lelusia to be destroyed. Now, this kind of just seems unnecessary because God Valley was already sinking. So I thought maybe Uranus being used to laser beam it was a little overkill, but maybe they thought it was necessary. And also considering how limited on fuel they are, you know, with the mother flame or whatever else is needed to power Uranus, you think that they would conserve it a little more than having to use it on something that was already destroyed. Maybe they just wanted to make sure that it couldn't even be found underwater or whatever, and made for sure that Rox was dead, like vaporized dead. Because that was another theory that I had in the previous spoilers. It was like, maybe Rox is still alive, because I thought he still would have been Dami reverse seed or whatever, because we didn't fully know that it was like knocked out of him or whatever. But I guess Rox is for sure dead now, which, you know, it's unfortunate, and we already paid our respects to the goat, but his will live on through Blackbeard. So I'm, you know, really looking forward to seeing what Blackbeard does, especially coming off of this flashback. But after this point, I'm going to skip around because, you know, a lot happens in this chapter. But then we see like the world kind of reacting to what had happened at God Valley, essentially. Not literally God Valley, but we just see like the newspaper saying that the Rox Pirates have been disbanded. And the narrator also says that obviously the information has been tampered with. Garp is upset with this article, of course, because he doesn't want to take the false credit here. And this is Garp recovering back at Marine HQ, and he's talking to Sengoku the bum here. And Sengoku says, "Stop it, Garp. Obviously, all of this has been covered up with money by the world government. They're a massive organization, and you can't possibly keep track of everything they do. Even if I notice the higher-ups pulling some shady moves, I'll just turn a blind eye." And it's like, wow, Sengoku, you suck even more than I thought you did. And I guess this explains why Garp hasn't been reprimanded for attacking a freaking Gorosei Emu. But at the same time, there could have been other ways to go about this, because first of all, aside from just him attacking Gorosei and Emu, he's a D. So, like, why are you letting him live? And don't just say it's like, oh, because he's so powerful, they need him. They have plenty of powerful Marines. They have freaking Garling. But I guess it's also been way too far into the story for Oda to place credit on Garling or just the Holy Knights in general, because he hadn't built them up at all until, what, the last 30 chapters or so? They weren't even revealed until, like, 2 years ago in the story. So I guess he can't just make that big retcon as to where it's like, yeah, the Holy Knights are known to the world, and Garling is actually the hero. I get it. They're trying to have Garp be the hero and the mascot and the fall guy for all of this stuff coming out of God Valley. So I guess bolster public reception as they have, and to also bolster the resolve of the Marines themselves. Maybe they feel that it would be better than just having a celestial dragon be that. But Garp is angry with Sengoku for having these sentiments, as he should. He's like, that's exactly why I can't stand you, Sengoku. You're always chasing a promotion. And Sengoku's like, ah, shut up. You think yelling from the bottom of a cliff is going to change anything? And Garp's like, if you ever become corrupted, I'll personally kill you myself. And he's like, yeah, well, that's why I'm glad to have a best friend like you. Then he's like, no, seriously, you're not quitting, right, Garp? And Garp's like, no, I've got a lot to protect at the bottom of that cliff. And I like that Garp is saying this. I respect that. And I also even kind of respect what Sengoku is saying. Like, there's no point in yelling at the bottom of the cliff. It's because in his mind, it doesn't matter if you fight back against the corruption of the world government, because there's ultimately nothing that he can really do. Like, he's not strong enough to overthrow them, both physically and politically. So he feels it's just better to fall in line, be a cog in the machine. And Garp kind of has a similar sentiment to that as well, without just outright saying it, because, you know, him saying, I've got a lot to protect at that bottom of the cliff, he's referring to the Marines themselves, because that was his reasoning to Roger as to why he wasn't leaving. These are flawed characters, just the way that Harold is. But at the same time, we see what Dragon does, which, you know, is Oda acknowledging that Garp and Sengoku are wrong in what they are doing, even though that they feel they are justified. Even though they both realize and acknowledge that they are wrong themselves. So we, the audience, are allowed to be divided on this. Some of us can rationalize with Garp and even Sengoku, I guess. And then some of us can rationalize and side with Dragon, as which I am. Because speaking of that, later on in this chapter, we see Garp coming to Dragon's cell. Dragon was in prison because we saw him turn against the Marines with a freaking gun, saying that they have to save the survivors of God Valley here, or he's going to kill them. And this is the first time that we see Garp and Dragon interact in the series. And it's pretty satisfying, to be honest, despite it being so brief. Because Dragon's like, Pops, I'm quitting the Marines. And Dragon's like, okay. He's like, if anything, I despise you. And Garp's like, yeah. And then he throws him the key to, release himself. So it's like after this, Dragon escapes and then goes on to start the Revolutionary Army. And I love that he says, I despise you, because he knows what Garp is doing is wrong, at least in his mind. Sorry, guys, there's like landscapers blowing stuff around. If you hear that, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry. But again, it's just putting forth the multiple narratives in this series, which we're allowed to have emotional reactions to. Dragon seeing that, hey, Garp, you realize that you're serving psychopaths and you're still choosing to align with them. Even if you do feel that you are vindicated in protecting the Marines, you still are facilitating a totalitarian regime run by insane psychopaths. So Dragon himself is going to actively try to change that, rather than just staying in there for the sake of helping the Marines or whatever. He's trying to make actual tangible change by becoming the Revolutionary Army, which he ultimately does. I mean, we see that they are making some big headwinds now currently in the story. But before this, we see like this flashback within a flashback of one of the times that Rox had went to Elbaf trying to like convince Harold to get on his side. While he's like trying to see him, he winds up seeing Loki instead, because Loki is a stand for Rox, of course. I mean, why wouldn't he be? And he's refusing Loki to join his crew because he's like, I don't let kids on my crew, which is understandable and really hilarious because, Whitebeard and Roger let kids on their crew. And Loki winds up saying that he thinks Rox is like Nika because he's the warrior of liberation, and laughs while he destroys the world. And Rox is like, destroy? No, I want to become the king of the world. If anyone had that kind of power, it'd be Harold. Look, somewhere in this world there exist these unbelievable destroyers called the Galila, just lying dormant. And the only one who can set them in motion is your old man. If your dad and I work together, who on earth could possibly stop us? So this is fascinating because we had heard about the Galila before. Not even mentioning like the Galila construction company that we saw back in Order 7, which we'll get to, but the giant Galila, they were mentioned by Jarl back in chapter 1154. This is 56 years ago, which was like 16 years before God Valley or whatever. It was right after Harold had met Rox at the Reverie. And Jarl says to Harold, say, have you ever heard of the Galila band? And Harold's like, that group of hardy giant shipwrights, hammer-wielding warriors, right? I thought they were a myth. And Jarl's like, no, they most certainly existed. They traveled to distant shores and sent a letter back to Elbaf from afar. It said, we have all been taken prisoner. Can you believe that? Who could have possibly captured 100-strong company of our kind? With ancient giants among them to boot. And Harold's like, you think the world government did that? And Jarl says, it's clear that we had a great enemy at some point in the past. But all of that history was sunk under the sea one day. I've heard stories on the wind about an army of giants put on ice and hidden somewhere. So them being captured makes sense because it is very likely that the Galila are the same giants that we saw frozen in Punk Hazard. Because look, this guy looks the same as that guy, so it makes sense, right? And given that the shipwright company on Water 7 is called the Galila Company, it's not a coincidence. Obviously, it was based off of the Galila giants. And given that Tom had the blueprints to Pluton, which he gave to Frankie, I think this all means that the Galila giants were the ones who constructed Pluton, which is one of the 3 ancient weapons. And I think Frankie said that Pluton was constructed as a way to combat against Poseidon, which is like the mermaid princess that can control the Sea Kings. And that makes sense since it's a big freaking ship. So I guess this means that Rox thinks that the Galila giants can recreate Pluton yet again, because they had the blueprints for them at this time and they existed somewhere in the world, and one way or another maybe unfreezing them can bring them back to life. I mean, I know that's crazy in our world, but in One Piece it probably makes sense, because if he were to overthrow the world, he would need Pluton to do it essentially. And I guess that's also going to further parallel to Blackbeard maybe eventually getting Pluton, because Caribou knows that Pluton is underneath Wano. And he is currently with the Blackbeard pirates, and he's obviously going to tell Blackbeard that. So they're eventually going to invade Wano and take Pluton. At least I'm thinking that's what's going to happen. So Blackbeard will be fulfilling one of Rox's goals that way. But anyway, coming into the final sequence of this chapter, we see Harold reflecting on Rox's death, and he's like beating down this giant who's like robbing these random humans. He's like, don't you get it? With a huge body like that, you're the ones who created fear toward the giants throughout history. Because of that, they won't trust us, like the world government or the humans. And he's like, I can't afford to disappoint the government. But the real thing that he's upset with is that he didn't help Rox, because he remembers Rox's discussion with him that they had before God Valley when they were sharing sake. Rox was like, looks like luck isn't on my side, Harold, help me out. And he's like, I didn't help him. I abandoned my best friend when he begged me for help, and I let him die. And I appreciate that Harold is at least calling Rox his best friend here, because it was really up in the air how he truly felt about him for the longest time. But he's like, there's no turning back anymore. I won't forgive the wickedness of giants. You know, just like with Garp and the other characters, Harold is a very flawed character, and it's because he's supposed to be. He's conflicted because he was trying to bring peace to the giants and have them be a part of the world and not have them feared anymore. So that's why he didn't want to help Rox, because if he felt that he was helping Rox, it would make him look like a bad guy to the world government. Now he's like, well, in the end, Rox wound up dying, and I regret it. I should have helped him. So what I can ultimately do here is go through with what I planned to do in the first place. And it's like, show the world that Elbaf and the giants are good and peaceful people, and we can rectify our history with everyone. So he winds up going straight up to the world government, or I guess he's at Marineford here, it looks like. And he winds up ripping out his ancient giant horns and presenting them to them. And he's like, allow me to atone for 1,000 years. All the mistakes the giants have committed so far. From now on, I want the children of Elbaf to live without harming anyone. I want to coexist peacefully with the humans. I want to prove my vow for peace. And I guess this also goes back to what Jarl was saying about the Galila back in chapter 1154, about how it's clear that we had a great enemy at some point in the distant past. And given what we saw on the mural of the Atom Tree with the Harley text and everything, the giants for sure were allied with Joy Boy against Emu. So that's one of their big issues right there, not being on the winning side of history. So Harold obviously doesn't know everything, and he's conflicted regardless, but this is him trying his best to make everything right. Even though in the end he sucks, and I don't like Harold, he feels that he's doing the right thing at least. But let me know what you think about all this in the comments, guys. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.